Good evening, class. Any doubts you have? पढ़ना भी है document along with the PPT. Have you received the PPT? Classification of debt? Just a second, they're just uploading the document. What is tax buoyancy? Tax buoyancy is the change in tax collection when you have a change in GDP. Now, how is GST collected? GST is collected as a percentage of the value of the product, right? And I have the provision of income tax, the input tax credit. So if more number of people are in the system and they're paying as per a percentage of value, will I have increase in tax collection? As compared to before, will I have increase in tax collection? So that increase can be more as compared to what GDP was. So change in GDP is less, tax is changing more. This is what a tax buoyancy is. Any tax is buoyant when the change in GDP, the tax is also increasing by more than 1. So this is equal to 1, that means GDP bada, tax is also increasing at the same rate. Tax becomes buoyant more than 1 when it is increasing at a faster rate as compared to GDP. This is the concept. Now, if GDP collections are increasing year on year, the rate will define what the buoyancy is. So उस rate से ही पता चल रहा है tax buoyancy after GST has increased because indirect tax collections have increased because of this. We'll talk about GST also. Tax expenditure. Whenever the government tax expenditure, this is what I'm coming to. Tax expenditure, whenever the government has given certain heads of taxes, for example, direct tax ka ye provisions hai. They've also provided certain exemptions. Are exemptions provided on direct tax? Whenever you calculate your income, whatever your income is, there are certain exemptions that don't go into the income for purpose of tax. For example, house rent allowance, if you put money in provident fund, all of those are exemptions. The money which the government foregoes because of exemptions, this is called as tax expenditure. Exemption की वजह से जो tax नहीं मिला, that is tax expenditure. And the cost of collecting tax is the expenditure on tax collection. इसको जो, for example, income you estimated and you filed your income tax return. Now, how do we know that you are not lying? There are IT officials, ED भी है, वो कुछ और पर्पस के लिए है वैसे. Prevention of Money Laundering Act, not anything else. हाँ भी लगा दो, right? तो अब उन्होंने estimate करना है कि everybody is saying the truth or not. तो officers लगे हैं estimate करने के लिए. वो cost of collecting the tax. Tax expenditure is the money foregone because of the exemptions claimed by the people. That is tax expenditure. UPSC once asked this question for 5 marks in mains. What do you mean by tax expenditure? Is the broader classification of public debt clear? State government, the various sources, and public debt. We've completed till off-budget borrowings. I've given you certain more data on both state finances and public debt. Current account deficit. What is the concept of current account deficit? See, the trend on current account deficit is slightly difficult to capture. UPSC asked one time, और उसी time question वापस लेना पड़ गया. That given a statement that India imports more goods as compared to exports. But 1 month before the exam, due to pandemic, exports were more than imports. So they had to cancel the question. The trend is, this trend of current account deficit changes too fast, so the question will be very less on the trend. But you should know what is the implication of the current account deficit. Why do we have a current account deficit? Those dynamics could be asked, not the trend of current account deficit. Because trend changes too fast, the statement might not be true, because what happens before the exam would also matter. Now, any country maintains balance of payment accounts as per the IMF standards. The IMF standards say balance of payment account has 3 accounts. One is the current account, the other is capital, and the third is financial account. But for our exam purposes, we combine both capital and financial into one, and we talk about capital account. The difference between the two is that the current account will record all those transactions that do not impact the asset liability of the country. Asset liability of the people, asset liability of institutions, asset liability of the government. Anything which is a short-term flow that does not impact the asset liability becomes your current account. Current account, what are the various components of current account? There are visibles, which is trade in. Visibles are only goods trade. This is your export and import. Which countries we are exporting, which countries we are importing from, what are the 5 commodities we export, what are the 5 commodities we import, these trends should be known. This is what we call as the balance of trade. One of the UPSC questions, CDS this year, they are asked difference between balance of trade and balance of payment. So they asked if this happens on the current account, or this happens if the country is doing this, what will change? Balance of trade will change or balance of payment will change? They made a 4-statement question. So you can have a question on this. You should understand what is balance of payment and what is balance of trade. It is only the goods trade. Then you have invisibles. Invisibles include trade in services, the investment income. What is the idea of investment income? What is the idea of investment income? See, you need to understand, then only you'll be able to solve questions. याद नहीं करना है सिर्फ. If you have foreigners holding your asset, you are holding assets outside. These assets can provide income. Ownership of the asset gets recorded in capital account, but the income coming from these assets get recorded in current account. If any of the asset holding, and what is the difference between the two? What is it called? The total assets which outside people are holding in Indian domestic territory and Indians holding outside. What is the difference called? NFI, net factor income from abroad. I am talking about asset. Net factor income abroad बहुत अलग concept है. The difference between what Indians have assets outside and what outsiders have assets in India. This is called as the international investment position. The international investment position in India is negative because more people are holding Indian assets as opposed to what we are holding outside. This term is international investment position, and the net international investment position for India is negative because more people are holding Indian assets as opposed to what we are holding outside. This is a slightly different concept from balance of payment. The net international investment position. The investment income includes rent, profit, interest, or also salary or wages which you have earned from outside. And then you have transfers. The difference between the two is this is earned for providing certain asset. ये asset से income है. This income is without any, it's a unilateral payment without any good or service in return. It's not a debt, it's one-sided payment without anything in return. This includes the government receiving grants and aid, also the government giving grants and aid. Then these are called as private transfers, and this is public transfers. The whole idea of current account is those components which are not impacting the asset liability structure. Now, why does India have a deficit on this? The whole article talks about deficit here and what is its implication. Why does India have a deficit on this? Sometimes deficit increases, sometimes deficit is controlled. This first half of 2024, the deficit was controlled to 1%, otherwise it's roughly around 2 to 3%. What is the reason for this deficit? The biggest problem is this. See, what happens here is, and what exactly then becomes a problem. If India has a current account deficit because of import-export imbalance. Now, if you have an import-export imbalance, that means India is sending dollar outside as compared to what they're earning. If there is an import-export balance, that means current account deficit. Current account deficit means we have a more outflow of dollar. Now, if you have more outflow of dollar, what happens to exchange rate? What happens to exchange rate? The exchange rate will depreciate, rupee will lose value. That if it is 70 rupees, now it is going to 80. Now, what is the impact of this? Whenever a currency depreciates, you can have an import or you can have an export improvement. Export improvement can happen that you can send in more quantity because it becomes now cheaper. At the same time, imports become costly and therefore the quantity should be reduced. ये होता नहीं है. This is why we suffer on current account deficit. Benefit will only be received on the balance of payment accounts when you are able to make the quantity changes. If you are not able to make the quantity changes, the depreciation will hurt the economy all the more. Why will it hurt the economy? Because of global demand, not towards Indian goods, you are not able to increase the quantity. तो आपके exports सस्ते हो गए हैं, but वो ज़्यादा नहीं बिक रहे हैं. But import quantity is not being reduced. Why? Because most of the imports which India has are inelastic in nature. What do you mean by inelastic? Price inelasticity, that means my price is changing, but my quantity is not responding. If my quantity is not responding to the change in price, that means the good is inelastic. If the good is inelastic, that means despite the price rise, I am not reducing the quantity. That means the cost of imports becomes high. If the cost of imports become high, this means I have significant amount of inflation in the economy. That is why current account deficit mostly depends on what is the situation of imports in the rest of the world. If the cost of the imports increases, now this is because of exchange rate. For example, you are importing $100 worth of oil. In the first case, you were getting it for 7,000 rupees. In the second case, you are getting for 8,000. That means India is impacted by the imports. Depreciation will also hurt. Also, if this $100 goes to 120, this will also hurt. So two things, the imports, price of imports becoming costly and the depreciation will lead to further increase in cost. This is why current account deficit becomes a problem for India. And now in the previous 6 months, the cost of the imports is not 100, the cost of import has gone to 70. This is why the current account deficit was reduced. Because the price of imports, because of the global commodity cycle, before this 6 months, the prices were increasing. The prices of commodities were increasing. But now in the last few months, the prices have reversed. If they have reversed, our outflow of dollar becomes less. Our outflow of dollar becomes less. The current account deficit will be controlled. This is how current account deficit can lead to inflation. Is this relation clear? Why it is leading to inflation? Because you are trying to, the more imports outside, depreciation further increasing the imports becomes a cycle. Is the idea clear? What is the problem of current account deficit? One is that it can bring in inflation if you don't reduce the quantity of imports. Another problem of current account deficit is, if you have more dollars to pay to the rest of the world, how are you going to get these dollars? How are you going to get the dollars? You are going to use the capital account. Capital account means either you are going to take a loan, this is what we discussed, external debt profile of India, or you are going to take investment. Either you are going to take a liability or you are going to sell your asset to someone else. Foreign direct investment or foreign portfolio investment, both of mean that you are giving control of your asset to someone else. So either you sell your asset or take a loan. But if you have too much of problem on this current account deficit, will this activity happen? This can become a problem. Initial current account deficits, that means foreigners are holding more assets in your country. More foreigners controlling your assets. Now this is one problem where you are giving more power to the foreign countries. And if you deteriorate this too much, they will lose the trust in your country. They lose the trust, this money is not coming. And then you will use your official reserves. So the problem of a high current account deficit is that it can bring in inflation in a country if you're not able to reduce imports. Another problem is that more and more control of your assets goes to the foreign countries. You have too much of liability. A problem in dono cases mein, one is you're giving away control of asset. Second is we are taking a loan. How will you repay the loan? Until and unless you increase your export competitiveness, how will you find the money to repay the loan? How will you get the dollars to repay for it? So both of these issues, these are problems for the country. India does not face a very big problem because India has significant amount of this. Any point of time, the RBI can increase the amount of official reserves in the economy and balance this out. ये significant है, इसलिए problem नहीं है. 2 to 2.3% of current account deficit led to a crisis in 91. And today we are comfortably on 3% of GDP having a current account deficit. GDP भी बढ़ गई है. Why we are safe? Because we have this. Is the idea clear? The third one component here is bank deposits. NRI deposits, the 3 accounts which we discussed yesterday. Is the idea clear? Current account deficit mostly happens because of this imbalance. Because India has significant import demand from rest of the world, and most of these imports are inelastic in nature, that is, they don't respond to prices. They don't respond to prices, that means even when the price is increasing or the value of currency is falling, you will have no choice but to pay more. How do you pay more? Either you take a loan or you sell your assets. This will not happen after a point of time because no country will trust you because of your economic instability. This is why when we say macroeconomic stability, why will someone invest in your country? Because they want returns. Every developing country can give returns, least developed countries can also give returns. But you also have to provide them certain amount of stability. Stability, what do we mean by macroeconomic stability? That is, you are controlling the amount of inflation, you are controlling the current account deficit, and you are controlling the fiscal deficit. ये तीनों variable अगर control में नहीं है, you will not get this. This is why you see the moment certain countries experience a problem here, they straight away have to go to IMF. Because nobody is ready to give them loans or invest in their countries, whether it was Pakistan, whether it is Sri Lanka, or even Bangladesh. The moment you have an imbalance here, and you are not secure here, you don't have stable conditions, that is, you are not able to control them in check. No one will be ready to invest in your country, or no one will be ready to give you loans. This is how countries face a problem of international liquidity. Then they have to go to the IMF, then they negotiate with the IMF on conditions. And one more thing we'll discuss, swap agreements. They can also have swap agreements, how they get dollar loans from friendly countries. Is the idea clear? Current account deficit. Reasons behind increased current account deficit, you have a higher trade deficit. A problem हमेशा trade deficit से ही होगी. That is import and export of goods. You might have a service receipt decline. This is not a normal thing to happen, but mostly it is trade deficit only. But this can also be a cause of current account deficit decline. Impact of global factors. If global economy slows down, that means Indian exports, commodities selling to rest of the world, the probability becomes less, which again lead to high trade deficit. Major point of problem is trade only, and that too imports of goods. Rising oil prices, again imports. Foreign direct investment, this does not have any relevance here. FDI decline is better to finance the deficit, but doesn't have an implication on current account deficit. Increase का cause नहीं हो सकता.
सर हम कैसे इंपोर्ट को कंट्रोल करेंगे? हमें नेसेसरी कमोडिटीज तो मंगाना पड़ेगा.
तो नेसेसरी के अलावा बाकी चीजें हैं. You have so much of domestic production of things, why not increase that? The biggest problem in India, whether it is respect to jobs or with outside trade, is that we are not producing a lot of commodities. Even if it is not necessary, we are importing much more than what is necessary because we don't have the production units in India. If you don't have production units of those things, you will not be able to control import. See, trade deficit can be controlled only because of two things. One, either you control your imports or you increase your export. दोनों चीजों में आपको productive efficiency चाहिए. You need technology so that the world buys from you. If you're not producing products which world buys from you, that's a problem. And if you see the export basket of India, what is the maximum good which we are exporting? More than 20% is petroleum related goods, refinery.
तो सर ये तो हमारे नेसेसरी है, हमें तो मंगाना पड़ेगा ना.
Export. उसके अलावा भी तो आप import कर रहे हो oil के अलावा. This is what I'm trying to tell. You can control that import. For example, agricultural goods we are importing so much. Why is India importing fruits and vegetables? Why is India importing pulses or oilseeds? Can't we produce all of these three things in the country itself? What is the reason why we are importing? And this is just one example I'm telling you. Manufacturing goods, most of the goods are coming as imports. Because for most of the time, India had a taxation policy which is called as there was a reversal of duty structure. The inverted duty structure meant, and this was in most of the goods, inverted duty structure, ideally, raw material should have more import duty or the finished good should have more import duty. Which one should have the more import duty? The finished good. You should get raw material so that you produce in your country, you add value in your country. But if I have more import duty here and less import duty here, which product I'm going to get from outside? So inverted में इनका ज़्यादा करते हैं import duty. So most of the products face this problem. For example, in textiles, India has significant import duty on man-made fiber. Now, if India has significant import duty on man-made fiber, that means cheaper imports are not coming. You are asking your domestic producers to take it from domestic suppliers. Domestic suppliers ने आपको man-made fibers दिए, but उनका cost बहुत ज़्यादा था. If their cost was high, now do you have export competitiveness? Duty structure से भी impact करता है आप क्या कर रहे हो. For example, government said that laptops पे 20% import duty और we are going to do that. वो जब तक implement होता उससे पहले ही लोगों ने laptops भर लिए. Import increased. So it's not just the competitiveness of the product, it is also about what duty structure you are following. उससे भी impact होगा. This is why regional trade agreements become very important, because now what the government is facing, there are two things with respect to exports. One is you diversify the exports which you are doing. This is how you are going to bring benefits. Same export में आपको ज़्यादा value addition नहीं मिल रहा. Diversify the products which you sell to the world. That means build a certain competitiveness here. And second is find other countries. All the documents of the government will always talk about this. Okay, already existing exports में we are not able to do anything. We need to diversify to other items, and also we need to find other countries where we can provide the material. So all of these dynamics have this impact here. तो necessity के अलावा भी बहुत सारे products हैं. So that imbalance will only solve the current account deficit. Because the moment people have more investments here, that means उनका income भी बढ़ता जाएगा. तो वो outflow भी बढ़ता जाएगा. Because to finance this, you are taking investments. If you're taking investments, that means this income will be more for the outside people. Already you have a negative international investment position. That means this component is negative for you. The only two positive components are service exports and remittances. So you have to work on this aspect. If this aspect does not work out, we will always have a problem of current account deficit. Most of our problem got solved because we got this. Situation could have further deteriorated. Competitiveness with the world is what we are seeking in export products. If you see the top 5 exports which go from India, it's petroleum related goods, it's gems and jewelry, and it is engineering goods. So we don't have a very diversified export basket sending to many countries. Very few players taking those goods from us. और refined में भी हम import कर रहे हैं फिर export कर रहे हैं. Because direct export is not allowed. Even crude or natural gas, direct export is not allowed.
Sir, when it comes to deficit financing, is there any internal borrowing mechanism?
Internal?
Borrowing mechanism?
How? How will you get dollars from internal mechanisms?
Through G6 or
No, G6 how? The
RBI?
point is, if dollar does not come here, whoever will bring the dollar here will convert it into rupees. Yeah. Right? So you have usage of rupees in the country, not dollars. So how will you have loan agreements in dollars? And even if you have a loan agreement in dollars within the country, even if someone is holding dollars, उसको guarantee क्या आप वापस dollar दे पाओगे? Everyone has rupees in the economy. So now if the importer has certain rupees, why is the world dealing with him? Because he knows that RBI can release those dollars in the market जो उन्होंने reserve बनाया है. Otherwise, how will someone have dollar in your economy and ready to give out a loan? Why will someone store dollar and give out on loan where dollar is not available in your economy? और dollar का क्या use है इनका? If someone is earning dollar, whether it is an exporter here or remittances, can they use dollar? So what is good for it? You will have to exchange and then use. वो exchange की वजह से तो हमारे reserves बन रहे हैं. वो dollar ला रहे हैं तभी हम reserves बना पा रहे हैं. Dollar ला रहे हैं तभी dollar से pay कर पा रहे हैं. अगर डॉलर नहीं आएगा, and how will you get loan? Nobody can print dollars. मतलब legally तो.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Is the idea clear?
Official reserves from the BOP, then is there any particular trend?
Like?
Let's say if we just add current account and capital account.
India has significant surplus. This is the reason why we are able to build this, the official reserves. How are the official reserves being built? This is negative.
Correct.
This is significantly positive.
Okay.
International investment position is negative. That means more people are holding assets in India, foreign direct investment and foreign institutional investment. We have more loans, 20% of GDP, we have taken loans from outside. This is what we discussed, external debt to GDP, वो पूरा ये component है.
Okay.
Right? And bank account also, NRI significantly is putting money on those accounts. ये तीनों ही inflow of dollars हैं, much more than what the deficit is. तभी तो dollars हमारे पास ज़्यादा है, तभी reserve बना है. Otherwise, how will you build the reserve? The RBI intervenes in the market to build the reserve. How do you build the reserve if this is not surplus? ये बहुत ज़्यादा surplus है, तभी reserve बना है. We were 1.2 billion. Now we are more than 500 billion, 600 billion. How did they get that 600 billion? Because this is significantly positive. Consider after 2000, it was seen that India is the next big economy. We had the Asian financial crisis in 97. Now if US money, US does not need that money because there's no savings investment happening. Now where do they invest? It's either India or China. These are the next two big economies which are going to come up big. India has democracy, has market, has also demography. China also got a lot of investments. It's not that China has much more investments as compared to India. So India got that investments. Mostly these FDI came up in service sector industries. IT sector तभी तो बना India का. They put in industry, you started exporting, cheap exports of services from India. This is how we change the situation. And this is why the problem remains. Because this FDI-backed services is only covering small percentage of population. The major population chunk could have come from manufacturing exports. Manufacturing exports did not increase. Why do you think South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, all of these are manufacturing powerhouses? Because they were not producing for themselves. They were producing for the rest of the world. This is how they introduced competitiveness in their products. And they captured the market in most of the products. Now India is finding hard to compete with all of these. So what we are doing is import barriers. Atmanirbhar Bharat में import barriers हमने लगाए 3,000 items से ऊपर. Now, if you're imposing import barriers, you have to understand it's a globalized economy. Your cost of production will also increase. If laptops are not coming in your country, that means your domestic will increase the prices. Export competitiveness will be further harmed. So you'll have to carefully balance the two. Imports भी आ रहे हैं, but imports में value add होके exports भी हो रहे हैं. Because now there is no one product which one country is selling. It's a complete global value chain. So you will have to build your competitiveness in some products. Otherwise, this deficit will remain. Problem is that competitiveness is required not just for exports. It is also required for getting the jobs in India. Because manufacturing provides tradable goods. For example, Samsung is one of the largest player in mobile phones, every segment, lowest से highest. वो jobs बना रहे हैं. What are we doing if you are importing just the Samsung phone? This is a very big problem. Jobs कहाँ हैं? The competitiveness has to use that product and will get the jobs also. Everything's interconnected. Is the idea of current account deficit clear? Potential threats from increasing current account deficit. Foreign investment. If there is too much of instability, foreign investment may leave your country. Too much of macroeconomic instability, the foreign investments might leave. Exchange rate will deteriorate, devaluation, depreciation. Inflation because of this, because imports you are not able to reduce. You understand how current account deficit leads to inflation? It leads to inflation because you are not able to reduce the imports and the cost of imports is increasing. Payment imbalances, BOP crisis, if you don't have money, too much of people pulling out the money, reserves bhi khatam honge. Then from where are you going to find the money? Is the idea clear? In fact, we discussed 4 components yesterday which were global initiatives to control the debt of least developed countries. They had debt to number of countries. ये component control करने के लिए 4 initiatives we discussed yesterday. The debt suspension initiative कि dollar outflow ना हो उनके लिए, नहीं तो उनके लिए यहाँ problem हो जाएगी. Rapid financing facility, rapid credit facility, debt suspension, catastrophe fund, all of them were so that they don't have a problem here. In fact, the last window which the IMF introduced was for getting food, so that you have enough dollar for getting food. IMF is responsible for maintaining international monetary stability. This is why all of those windows were related somewhere to IMF, though introduced by G20. Is the idea clear?
प्रोजेक्ट सही रहेगा हम लोग के लिए आत्मनिर्भर भारत
What is the difference?
लाइक आत्मनिर्भर भारत हम अपने डोमेस्टिक कंपनीज को प्रमोट करें और नए नए एंटरप्रेन्योर्स को
Both of them, with respect to foreign players, have no significant policy change. Make in India was happening, even if you're a foreign player, you make in India. Atmanirbhar Bharat, PLI also say, even if you're foreign, come make in India, we are going to provide you production linked incentive. So both of them have a similar strategy. But what the government otherwise, apart from these policies, doing is, government is erecting barriers by increasing import duty.
सर लाइक जैसे फॉरेन कंट्रीज से जो कंपनीज आती हैं उनको यहाँ इंडिया में आने में प्रॉब्लम लाइक जब जनरल मोटर्स यहाँ से जा रहे थे तो लेबर लॉ का जो इशू आता है एक बार
See, this is what is the art of policy making. If Tesla says कि हम यही सब करेंगे यहाँ पे आके, you cannot allow the exploitation of people in the name of cheap labor. You have the advantage of cheap labor doesn't mean you allow anything what the country is doing. You have to balance the interests of both. This is what happened in the Winston plant of Apple. There was a very violent upset because they were not paying the wages. तो आप उनसे 24 घंटे 18 घंटे काम करा के पैसे नहीं दोगे, your exports are increasing, but at what cost? So the same negotiation is happening with this Tesla. What Tesla is saying, see what the problem with Tesla is and why it is not ready to come to India, because it is now demanding too much of things from India. और इंडिया को करना because India requires investment, because India requires technology and also needs the dollars which the Tesla is going to bring. Now Tesla says we are going to build an enclave. That means we use your resources only, the raw resources, cheap labor, we'll use the capital, but we'll not provide any technology benefits. That means हमारा जो interaction होगा raw material का in terms of goods, we are not going to take anything from you. We are going to get everything as imports. What we are going to take from you is only the cheap labor and the capital of your banks. This is what is called as an enclave economy. They only take whatever is beneficial, not giving any technological benefits. Because the supply chain benefits should be received by domestic suppliers. So if Tesla is now assembling the car or making whatever, they have to take some parts from domestic, तभी तो ये लोग सीखेंगे कि competitiveness. This is what the spillover effect of foreign direct investment is. They should train your people and they should also provide this. But if they're not providing this and they're saying we'll increase only imports, then the question is at what cost do we bring Tesla in India? Same thing with Micron Technologies, which is an assembly testing packaging for semiconductors. वहाँ पे government is saying we will pay 70% of the cost of your plant. That means 100% of the profit is of company, 70% cost is of the government. So whenever you're bringing FDI, you have to carefully think what exactly are you going to give. If you don't get the technological benefits, you don't get the jobs, what exactly is the benefit of having Tesla in the country? This is what the negotiation is. Government is saying land free में दे देंगे, certain things which we provide to our industries, we'll provide it to you. But if you are saying that it is going to be enclave, no domestic interaction, this is going to be a problem. So at what cost are we bringing? और labor को भी आप बोल रहे हैं 20 घंटे काम कराएंगे. This is what Amazon does in China. Diaper बना के भेजते हैं लोगों को कि water break or emergency loo break is also not allowed. Now, do you want that type? And this is why Raghuram Rajan, he wrote a book recently, he said, manufacturing exports, you don't have any competitiveness and you can't build. So what you are saying is, you will build competitiveness on cheap labor. So what he effectively said is, cheap labor means you will convert them into serfs of the company. So this is what he said, PLI में आप most profitable, Apple को PLI दे रहे हो, most profitable company of the world needs incentive from you. What are you creating? You're creating serfs. So this is what he said, find job employment here. India can build on services. This is what he said in his recent book. Manufacturing exports will only lead to exploitation. किस cost पे करोगे? पैसे भी दे रहे हो. So why not build here? This is something which he says number of sectors जहाँ पे improvement आ सकती है. If you see the agriculture export basket also, most of the agriculture export basket is semi-processed or raw fruit or raw product. We don't have food processing industry. Why don't we have food processing industry? Just read about agriculture marketing and what the APMC and the other state government laws do. Now what the government tried to do is easy everything so that the private trader could take the produce from farmer. Farmer complained, आज ज़्यादा पैसे दे रहे हैं कल को नहीं मिले फिर. So everywhere you are stuck. Government doesn't want to promise MSP. Government says free market 3 bills. The farmer said free market will exploit. And this is what has been seen. Last year government said export ban on wheat and rice. जहाँ पैसे कमा सकते थे आपने कंज्यूमर बचा लिया. Tomato or anything, you have Essential Commodities Act, you have export bans, you have FCI selling in the market. So It's related. This is why agriculture produce will not come to the food processing industry. Consider if someone has to do food processing industry, that means he always has to get the supply of raw material. This is a problem not just because the APMC creates a problem. It's a problem also because you have Essential Commodities Act. Government ने बोल दिया 50 किलो से ज़्यादा नहीं रखना है. Now I'm a food processing player, you are imposing the hoarding limits on me because you are suspecting me to benefit out of black marketing. Then why will I set up a unit? This is why semi-processed products or either raw material will go out. Food processing industry doesn't go out. This is why Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, New Zealand, Australia, we were very that unka agriculture goods will flush the Indian market. Right now also if you see, if the apples coming in the market for Kinnaur and also Kashmir is at 300 rupees and Fiji is coming at 350. Fiji, Australia, New Zealand, everyone, US is selling apples in India. Consider apples in US, compare the prices, it's roughly the same. Then why will someone buy the domestic? Forget imports. So everything is interrelated. This is why farmers demand WTO se niklo. They want protection of their income. They're not seeing macro ke India mein kya ho raha, we don't know. We want more prices. This is why the demand of WTO. Is the potential threats from increasing current account deficit clear? That will depend on what type of conditions are we creating for them. Karna to padega, who else will build? The problem is if you don't allow imports, do you get the technology? Whether it is production or whether it is for consumer. Today if government says that imported tablets or imported laptops will not be allowed, or if will be allowed, the cost will be high. What laptop are you going to buy which is Indian? See, this is the question. Forget going to laptop. What mobile phone are you going to buy if the government increases the cost? यही question है ना कि competitiveness कहाँ है in industries की? So if you don't allow the imports, you are not getting any technology. I'm just talking about consumer goods. Capital goods mein most of the technology is coming from South Korea and Japan. We started building Maruti in 1980. Maruti is now a very credible player because it became Maruti Suzuki. That is FDI. वो नहीं होता, who would have? In fact, services, which domestic player apart from two? Infosys and Wipro. They are selling domestic services outside. अब उनको ही प्रॉब्लम हो रही है, वो बोल रहे हैं 70 घंटे काम करो. He's regularly pushing the agenda. So this is a problem because competitiveness is an issue. And artificial intelligence is going to threaten India's service exports. Because you are having voice, everything is being done through artificial intelligence, voice recognition से लेकर सब कुछ command पे सब कुछ हो रहा है. So how will you run the call centers in India? फिर वो scam centers बनेंगे. जमतारा होगा और क्या होगा? See, this is a threat, a very big threat. This is because everything is related. Why do you see so many people lining for so few government jobs? मतलब कितना लोगों में जज्बा है एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव वर्क करने का? Something which they are not trained for. They want security. Is government job fixed salary, fixed security. अब fixed salary government job को देनी पड़ेगी, डेफिसिट बढ़ जाएगा. काम तो वो पता नहीं क्या करेंगे, but revenue expenditure आज बढ़ जाएगा. It's a circle, everything is related. Dated securities. The concept of dated securities is clear. Government when buys from the market using longer term securities, more than 1 year. Dated government securities are of two types, one done by the central government and the other by state, the state development loans. Now one thing to be, what you need to remember here, is the domestic investor, that is retail investor. Is he allowed to buy government securities directly? Yes, this has already been asked in UPSC. You need to know the features of this scheme. Now this is called as the retail direct scheme. Now before this retail direct scheme, domestic retail investors could only buy government securities on the stock exchanges. They used to help them. And even if they had to buy in the primary market, the primary market was to be done through institutional investors. Banks and primary dealers are allowed to invest. Now what the government has done under retail direct scheme, any retail investor can invest in government securities in both primary and secondary market. And the difference is, secondary market earlier they were participating through stock exchanges. So stock exchange used to collect the bid and then used to do it on the government portal. The government portal for dated securities trade is called as NDS-OM. Negotiated dealing settlement order matching. This is a platform for secondary market of government securities. And now retail investors can directly participate in secondary market by placing a bid on NDS-OM. Earlier they did not have direct access to NDS-OM. NDS-OM is a platform for order matching of government securities, that is trade of government securities in the secondary market. For primary market, how does the RBI issue securities? It's the eKuber portal, the core banking solutions of RBI. Core banking solutions of any bank is the centralized software with which it connects to all of its branches. Core banking solutions is the centralized software of any bank. Centralized software of RBI is eKuber. Primary, you can buy eKuber, but there's a small difference here. You cannot bid for the security. आप auction में participate नहीं कर सकते हो. You can only participate by placing the amount you want without indicating the price. So it's a non-competitive bid which you can place for the primary issuance. So if the primary issuance you want to take securities, it is a non-competitive bid. That means the players which are allowed here, institutional players, they will go for the bid. Whatever the price of the security will be, आपको quantity मिल जाएगी. You cannot bid for price. Here you can bid for price. You can do it directly in the secondary market. But in the primary issuance, you cannot bid for price. So retail investors can directly invest in government securities through the retail direct scheme, where they will be allowed to open account with RBI called the retail direct gilt account. ये direct RBI के साथ उनका account होगा. An online portal will be present which is going to help them access this account, helping them buy the security without a competitive bid and secondary market में matching the bid. This is the retail direct scheme. Earlier, institutional investors only could invest, and they had the minimum amount which they could invest was 5 lakh or I think 5 crore. 5 lakh, a big amount. But now, retail direct investors can put in small amounts of 10,000. UPSC in 2021 asked a question whether retail investors are allowed directly, and the second statement they asked on what is NDS-OM. So the dated securities, even treasury bills, the people can participate in their trading directly by retail direct account. We've already discussed the concept of foreign institutional investors investing in government securities, the three routes which we discussed. This is retail investors directly dealing in government securities. Buy or sell government securities without having go through an intermediary. Earlier you were able to participate only through an intermediary. Wishing to open a retail direct gilt account, you can open with the RBI website directly. Minimum amount for bid is 10,000 rupees. Give access to the following services: primary issuance of government securities and access to NDS-OM. NDS-OM is the portal for secondary trade of government securities. Earlier, retail investors could access only through stock exchanges. Two ways through which you can buy through retail direct account: either directly in the secondary market or through entering the desired amount of securities without entering a price. So primary market mein you will enter into the bid without entering a price, and for secondary market you can directly bid for the price. This is the concept of retail direct scheme, participation in dated securities. The tax benefits. Some of the questions on capital markets tax also. Government security attracts tax on both interest and capital gains if the papers are traded in the market before maturity. But if it is held till maturity, there is no capital gains. Only the interest income is taxable under your other income, which will be counted while calculating income tax. There is no tax of capital gains if you hold the government securities till maturity. Why is this true? Why no capital gains if you hold it till maturity? If you hold the government security till maturity, will you have a capital gain? This is why no tax. Is the idea clear? Because what is the feature of any security or bond? What is the difference between security or bond? Is there a difference? Exactly same. Why two different names? What is the difference between a financial security or a bond? Financial security is something which represents a claim on money. And financial security is both a debt claim, that is bond, or an equity claim, that is shares. A security is something which represents a monetary value. A financial asset, something which represents a monetary value, that is claim on money. It can be a debt claim, that is bond. It can be an equity claim, that is shares. Now, what are the features of a bond? It has a face value. The table has discussed yield also. I'll just give you a brief on yield. How exactly the yield is determined and how it moves because of bond price. Face value, it has a coupon rate. And the coupon rate is fixed or is flexible? It is fixed or floating both. If you just read the document I've given you, marketable securities, dated securities are both fixed or floating. The government can issue a fixed coupon security, can also offer a floating security जहाँ हर 6 महीने में interest is changing on external benchmarks. Then it has a maturity period, the period for which it is issued. We discussed the maturity period for government bonds mostly are 5 to 10 years or 10 to 15 years. Short-term maturity is very less in India. Now this bond, whenever will be traded in the market, is its bond price. It is redeemed at face value. Before the maturity, if it is traded at the bond price. And the yield on the bond, that is the rate of return on bond, depends on coupon and bond price. These are the two factors which will determine what exactly is the rate of return you get on the bond, dependent on bond price and coupon rate. Now, bond price and yield are inversely related. Why? If the bond price is, face value is 100, if it is being sold for 102 and there's a fixed interest rate of say 8%, what is the return? 8 rupees. But if I buy this bond for 102, will the return be less than 8 or more than 8? Less. So that means if the bond price is increasing, the rate of return on the bond will fall. Similarly, if I sell for 97, that means the bond price is falling. If the bond price is falling, the yield will increase. Is the idea clear? If the bond is sold for higher price, it is less return. If it is sold for lesser price, it is higher return. That means bond price and yield are inversely proportional. That means yield for any bond depends on bond price. Since you cannot change the coupon rate, it is almost fixed. Although you know what you are getting, floating also you can't, because the condition of floating is already decided. Both things are already decided. Fixed is the rate is decided. Floating with the condition how it will float is decided. So anyhow, the returns which you're going to get are fixed. They are determined what returns you're going to get. That means whatever impact happens on yield is happening of bond price. Now, on what factors will bond price depend on? Any price of any product depends on its demand and supply. Any factor that impacts the demand and supply will impact the price of the bond, therefore will impact the yield. For example, why this is in news, bond yield, because recently under open market operations, the RBI has sold a number of government securities. Under open market operations, the RBI deals with monetary matters. Open market operations are not for debt management. They are only for monetary policy matters. If the RBI sells government securities in the market, if it is selling the government security in the market, what will be the impact on bond price? Think carefully. If it is selling government bond securities, what will happen to bond price? Why? The supply of the bond is increased, the bond price will fall. If bond price will fall, the yield will rise. Anything that impacts the demand and supply of the bond will impact the bond price, therefore impacting the yield. Now, why did the supply of government securities increase? Because India was facing significant amount of inflation. Also, if you consider inflation directly, forget what RBI did. If there is inflationary pressures in the economy, expectations are inflation will rise. What will happen to the demand or supply of the bond? If there is expectation of inflation rise, the demand of the bond will be high or low. अगर inflation ज़्यादा है, demand high होगा, low होगा. There will be no demand because my cost of living is increasing. If I have to spend more money on cost of living, why will I save the money in government security? That means the demand for the bond will be less. If now you want to create demand for this bond, you will have to increase the bond. अगर ये bond बेचना है, demand is not there. You will be only able to sell the bond when you are reducing its. That means the yield will have to increase. Is the idea clear? If the demand of the bond is not there, that means you can only sell when the price is low. You reduce the price and therefore the yield will rise. This is how inflation impacts demand or supply, therefore impacting bond price and yield. So whenever you have a question in the exam which talks about yield, you only have to think of one factor, that is what happens to bond demand and supply. Any factor that impacts demand and supply will impact the yield. This is the only relation which you need to study. One on one, if inflation is happening, demand पे क्या होगा, supply पे क्या होगा. If RBI is doing something, demand or supply, how it will change. For example, if the US government is increasing the interest rates, that means yield on their bond is going to go up. What will happen? Outflow of fund, that means the demand for your bond will be less. Now, how do you create the demand for the bond when you sell it for less? There will be pressure on the Indian government bond to increase the yield. So anything that impacts the demand and supply of the bond impacts its yield. Is the idea clear? Discount, if I'm offering at a discount, mostly government offers treasury bills and cash management bills on discount. Why will the government sell it at a discount? Until and unless this bond, I'm taking money only for say 91 days. So regular interest देने से अच्छा है you offer it at a discount. Only treasury bills and cash management bills are offered at a discount. Dated securities are always issued at a coupon. इसी का auction होता है. Primary dealers, e-Kuber, you have number of participants. 5 crore, I think 5 lakh is the minimum investment which you have to put. I think it's 5 crore. Is the idea clear? Bond yield and bond price. Capital
gains होगा क्या वो अगर discounted security कोई खरीद.
I will only issue it, give you at this price. वो पहले ही पता है आपका. Capital gain कैसे हुआ? तो आपको interest ही मिला. I issued at a discount. That means face price was already there. Face price से ज़्यादा अगर आपको पैसे मिले तो ही capital gain हुआ ना. That is already decided. I am issuing at a discount. That means this is the interest I am offering. I am redeeming it at 100. If I would have redeemed at a higher value, then you would say कि capital gains हुआ है. वही auction इसलिए ना. Over subscription, that means there's more interest. More interest, that means the coupon rate will change. The primary issuance में, this is what I was trying to explain. Whenever retail investors invest, they cannot enter into the auction. They can only tell what quantity they need. Auction will be done by the institutional investors only. Is this idea clear? Bond yield and bond prices? Goods and services tax. You understand the basics of GST? Why was GST introduced? First, why GST was in news? First, why GST was introduced? This one, news में क्यों है? Online gaming. There is now 28% tax on online gaming, but there's a slight change. Online gaming, 28% earlier was already present for a game of chance. There's a difference between game of chance and game of skill. This is something where you have certain experience and you use certain knowledge to predict the outcome. This is where it is totally based on luck. You can't predict the outcome. This is some skill involved, that if you're forming a team in Dream 11, you think this player will perform because you have done the study that ye average hai, ye pitch condition hai, so he might be scoring better. Yes, there is definitely a chance involved also because you're predicting, but you're predicting based on skill. Here you are predicting, there's no skill. It's a roll of a dice. So no matter what you do, you don't know what exactly will come next time. Same thing with coin flip. No matter what you do, even if it is 70%, still the probability might be wrong in the next case. So there is game of chance. Game of chance mein already it was 28%. Now everyone's got 28%. Whatever will be the contest entry amount. And this is applicable not just on online gaming, horse racing and also other betting, it's applicable throughout all games. Whatever is the contest entry amount, whoever is giving the platform to play the game, he is charging a platform fees. For example, if you have played Dream 11 or any of these online games, all of your money does not go into the prize pool. Some part of your entry amount goes as the platform fees. Rest of the amount goes in the prize pool. Now what the taxation system was, for game of chance 28% entry pe hi tha, but now it's applicable throughout. In the previous scenario, platform fees, whatever they were charging, on that they had 18% GST. So if you are having 100 rupees as entry, 20 rupees is your platform fees and 80 rupees goes into the prize pool. That means the GST was to be paid by this person on this amount. This is the gross gaming revenue. Whoever is giving you the platform, वो इसी से पैसे कमा रहा है. He is not getting anything here. He is getting money from this. This is called as the gross gaming revenue. So on your gross gaming revenue, you have to pay 18% as tax. So if you assume only one player is playing, 18% on this 20 rupees is collected. That means the government is going to collect. Is the idea clear? And whatever you win in the prize pool, more than 10,000 if you win, in fact, pure pe hai, if you win whatever amount, you will have to pay a 30% of income tax. And if you are winning more than 10,000, then that 30% will be deducted as TDS. So there are two taxations which were available, one platform fee 18% and prize pool 30%. Now this is the tax which stays. You will have to pay 30% of income tax on your prize winnings from any game, whether it is online gaming, horse racing or casino. Any game you win, you will have to pay 30% on your winnings. But now 18% is not on platform fees. You will have to pay, the company will have to pay 28% on contest entry amount. Whatever the entry is made, see, indirect taxes are levied on one, given by another. So in companies, they will have to deposit 28% of the contest entry amount with the government. So that means automatically your prize pool is now shorter. Because now 100 was completely coming here. Now 28% gone. Now rest will go as platform fees and then will prize pool. This is why it was called as a death knell on the gaming industry. Because significantly your prize pool will reduce. So your chances of participation in the game will be very less because you already have paid a significant tax on entry. The number of participants will be less. And this is the reason why most of these platforms were complaining that this is an arbitrary tax introduced after we have set up business. It's almost now 2 years that we have set up business, more than 2 years. You are giving a tax condition after 2 years. This is what is the instability in tax laws. This is why people will not be ready to invest in India. Yes, taxation, you can say is a good thing or a bad, that can be debated. But question is, before starting the business, did we know that the tax is there or not? This severely impacts the participation and the revenue for the companies. So this is the change which the government has introduced, 28% on the contest entry amount. We can very well debate that it is a sin good or not. We should be collecting taxes. But the point is, what point did you tell them the tax should be collected? Because several people, both foreign direct investors and Indian investors, have spent money on building these platforms. Now you are imposing tax which can impact the revenue. Is the idea clear? 28% GST on contest entry amount and 30% on winnings. More than 10,000 if the winnings, it will be deducted as tax, deducted at source. Is the idea clear? Now what is the idea of GST? Just a broad overview. GST, why was it introduced? Is this the first time that we are introducing value add tax? We had, value add tax before also. Center was levying excise, that is manufacturing. What are the heads of center? What taxes are the responsibility of center as per the constitution? सेस एंड सरचार्ज तो किसी भी टैक्स पे स्टेट भी तो कर सकता है सेस सरचार्ज ऑन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग प्रोडक्शन ऑफ एनी गुड सेकंड वाज ऑन इंपोर्ट दैट इज कस्टम्स एनीथिंग एल्स tax on services was only center and interstate trade. Interstate trade, the tax was called the central sales tax. Now the idea of central sales tax was, it was levied by the center but given to the producing state. Interstate trade mein given to the producing state, or in fact they were collecting it also, but levied by the center, given to the producing state. Taxes to the state were tax on sale. What else? Entry tax. Professional entertainment. Entertainment, luxuries. Professional. Transport. What tax? Transport. Interstate state did not have, वो center collect करेगा. कल ही ये बताएं heads. This was replaced by VAT. VAT is now GST. Liquor, there is an excise duty on what products, which the state is still collecting. Stamp duty is a direct tax. We're talking about indirect. Stamp duty, land revenue are direct taxes. Excise duty. Drugs. Used for medicinal purposes. Not for recreational purposes. That is illegal in India. Is the idea clear? Now, how exactly it was levied? This tax was levied as mod VAT, and certain changes were made. It was introduced as only one tax, that was sen VAT. So it was applied as value-added taxes. That means there was input tax credit being paid for the central value chain. Manufacturing value chain mein it was levied as a value-add tax when the input tax credit was being paid. Same thing the state did for most of the goods under this. They imposed a VAT. So we had value addition taxes. Center imposed it as sen VAT, that is on the excise, and sale, the state introduced VAT. But the problem was that if there is the whole supply chain where you have manufacturing and then sale, so if A to B there is manufacturing, B will get the the input tax credit from center government. But if this product goes for sale where state is collecting the tax here and center is collecting the tax here, then there is no input tax credit paid. There was no coordination between the center and the state to pay the input tax credit. If there is no input tax credit paid here, that means the cascading effect of tax will remain. You understand all what is cascading effect? Tax on tax. So if you don't pay the input tax credit, you will have to pay a tax on tax. So cascading effect remained. This was one problem. That they were charging one, they were charging another input tax credit between center and state ke chain mein, it was not available. Second problem was, when it is center sales tax, there is no provision of input tax credit. Whatever the central sales tax is being paid in transition of goods, that is not receiving any input tax credit. All the more when the state introduced value added tax for sales, it did not include all of these taxes as VAT. Value added was to be collected only in sales. Rest of the taxes were not included in value added tax. These taxes could also be included in value added. So if there is entry tax paid, entry tax ke liye aapke paas value addition pay, that is input tax credit, is not available. These were the problems in the taxation system. And this is why we introduced a uniform tax, that is GST. Already value added tax state was doing for sale. It did not include all taxes. One problem. Center and state having different value chain items. This is why input tax credit not being paid. And for center sales tax also input tax credit not paid. That means India had the problem of multiple taxes and cascading effect. All the more problems because every state had a problem of entry tax. And this is why uniform taxation. One tax for the entire country. But we could not introduce GST as one neutral rate, one rate. We had to introduce certain slabs. Idea was that GST was to be included as one revenue neutral rate. Now, what is one revenue neutral rate? What is the concept of this revenue neutral rate? 14 to 15% was recommended कि इतना ही होना चाहिए हर गुड पे. Before GST, both center and state are collecting certain taxes. What would be the rate of GST that the tax remains the same? There are 10 different taxes giving me one tax revenue. So what should be my GST so that I get the same revenue. This would mean I have one revenue neutral rate. This is the exact idea of one nation, one tax. Right now we don't have one nation, one tax because we have significant number of slabs. GST starts from, and this is just the broader 5 slabs. There are smaller slabs also. For example, 3% for jewelry, 0.3% for certain metals. So there are number of small taxes also. 7-8 rates हैं GST में, depending on number of items. ये broader taxes हैं. Now this is something calculated by the Arvind Subramaniam committee. They said कि revenue neutral आएगा 14-15. So every tax should be taxed the same. Every item should be taxed the same. But we did not go with this idea because we thought this would impose too much pressure on the poor. Not everybody is consuming the same product. The products mostly consumed by the poor should be here. Consumed by the rich should be here. This is why we have multiple slabs, and we have certain products which are not part of GST. What are the products which are not part of GST? Petrol के कौन से goods पे नहीं है? You have to be very specific because this can be a question. GST पे they have asked questions on this only, on which goods the tax is present or not present. Petrol, diesel, ATF. Is it only 3? LPG. LPG पे. Do you have LPG? Is this or it is GST or outside GST? LPG has GST. Ethanol? Ethanol has GST or outside GST? These are the probable questions. दोनों LPG और ethanol are GST. What is not GST is petrol, diesel, ATF, natural gas and crude oil. These 5 are not under GST. That means the state gets to levy VAT on sale and the center gets to levy excise, that is SENVAT. We'll come into next. Second is alcohol. And any other? Which is not part of this. Kali state ke taxes mein I told you this is a significant source of tax. These are the 2 items only. Land revenues, stamp duties, direct tax of state, that is with state only. Electricity. And there's one special product also, which is inside the GST and still center state can levy their own taxes. Those smoking should know कि कितना tax में contribution है at the cost of their own body. Tobacco. Tobacco is inside GST. Along with that, center can levy excise and the state can levy VAT. दोनों चीजें हैं उस पे, cumulative है. Is the idea clear? These 3 items are outside, this is outside, or this is both. Also, when we talk about these, are all of these taxes included in GST? Are all of these taxes included in GST? Which one is not? ये tax नहीं है. The additional duty and the special duties, countervailing, that is special duty and additional duties, these are part of GST. Custom duty is not part of GST. Custom duty is still with the government. And is the idea clear what items are out and what? These are the small mechanics which you should know about GST, because this is how the question can be framed from GST. One more thing, what about import and export? What about import and export? Are imports facing GST? Custom duty imports पे है, that is by the center. Are they facing GST? Imports are facing GST, they will face IGST, where one part will go to center and one part will go to state. Imports पे there is IGST. See, if we give a benefit of this tax to imports, domestic products will be harmed. Domestic पे you are charging GST, but imports पे not charging GST. That means you are giving preferential treatment to imports. This you cannot do. But we can create preferential treatment for exports. We want our exports to be competitive, and therefore exports are not outside GST, they are 0 rated. They are not exempt, they are 0 rated. Now what is the meaning of 0 rated? And in fact, this is the problem which is happening right now with one of the schemes which countries are challenging. the remission of duties in trade of exported products. Read about this scheme. This is in news now. It's not a subsidy on export. This is what has to be clarified. Subsidy to export was provided when this was the earlier scheme in the trade policy. Merchandise export from India. This scheme had incentives. This scheme does not have incentives or subsidy. What remission of trade does is, whatever exports, whatever duties you have paid, or whatever taxes you have paid, ये सारे refund होंगे. Why are we refunding? Because we don't want to destroy the competitiveness of our exports. Export महंगा इसलिए होगा because government collected taxes. And this is completely WTO compliant. Why this is being challenged? Because some countries don't understand, is it really a refund of tax or incentive? The data which we are providing to WTO on implementation of this, that is not clear, where some countries are challenging, you are not just refunding the tax, you are also paying them money so that they can export more. The government says this is the complete data, which is it's only remission of duties and taxes which we have taken from them. This is the ongoing controversy with this scheme. The previous foreign trade policy had merchandise export from India scheme where there were certain incentives based, and this scheme was not WTO compliant. Under the WTO, all of the agreements, export subsidies are not allowed until and unless explicitly permitted by the WTO. Because that is a race to the bottom. Every country will start exporting or subsidizing their exports. So under this scheme, you are going to get a refund of all your taxes for exports, and there is no incentive other than this refund. And this is how these concepts are related. Now there are two things. One is zero rated and the other is the concept of GST exempt. Now what the idea here is, whenever the government, दोनों cases में, the end product has no GST. The end product has no GST in both cases. So the government says this product is exempt from GST. That means whatever the supply chain of the product is, whenever the consumer will buy this product, he will pay no GST. Same thing with zero rated. Whatever the supply chain, the end consumer will not pay GST. That is, exports are zero rated. Now what is the difference between the two? But in this whole supply chain, there would be certain claim of input tax credit. The idea of indirect tax is what? You can shift the liability. So I have to collect from all. सबने मिलके liability यहाँ कर दी. But now you can't take anything from here. This is how indirect taxes work. Indirect taxes are on the manufacturing or sale. And the whole GST has changed the concept. Now we are not levying it on manufacturing or sale. We replace both these words with the word of supply. Manufacturing पे center था, sale पे state था. Now we have changed the words to supply. So GST is levied on supply of goods. So it will be supplied from here to here, there is GST, here to here, there is GST. Right? Cumulatively, consumer used to pay. This is how incidence and impact is different. When the product is zero rated, there is input tax credit. When A sold the product of 100 and gave say 10% GST, इन्होंने 110 का लिया. 10 rupees is the already tax paid. Now you need to refund them. When the product is zero rated, this input tax credit will be refunded. When the product is exempt, this ITC will not be given to anyone in the supply chain. So what will happen in this case is, even when you are not collecting the GST, product महंगा हो जाएगा. Because no one got the input tax credit claim. Consider, A sold the product for 100, paid a tax of 10%. B got it for 110. They added a value of 20. They sold it for 130. 10% tax on them. This becomes a product of product का price बढ़ता जा रहा है. Because there is no input tax credit. But in this case, 110 B got, but B already paid 10. So B will be given input tax credit. वो 100 पे 20 add करके they will make a product of 120 and the tax will be 12 only. यहाँ cumulative tax 23 था. वहाँ cumulative tax was 10 plus 12. 10 is now given back. So total tax is 10 from A, 12 from B. This 10 rupees which was collected from A has been collected from B has been given. So tax is 2 plus 10, that is only 12 rupees. But in this case, tax is 10, it was not given back, so therefore the tax was 10 plus tax on tax plus 2. This became 23, 10 plus 13, इनको इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा जो गुड्स एग्जेम्प्ट है. Those who are zero rated, they will get the input tax credit. This is the difference between GST exempt and GST zero rated. Embedded taxes are also removed when the product is zero rated. Is the idea clear? Imports are taxed both custom duty by the center and IGST. IGST is something which is levied on interstate trade. One part is taken by the center and the other part is given to whom? Which state? Destination state. Is the idea clear? Zero rated and GST exempt. तो यहाँ तक वो प्रोडक्ट में तो बढ़ता जाएगा ना. So they will share, all of them will share the cost. Indirectly, तो this last chain will pay. So I will sell the product for higher value even if I'm not collecting tax. अब मैंने product price किया इतना. Say for example, this 10% is not there. So I'll sell it for 130. 10% यही तो हटाया मैंने. तो अगर CD हटा दो, सीधा consumer कर दो. There is no 10%. He will charge 130. Is the idea clear? This is exempt. It is indirectly because chain में कहीं तो आएगा. Indirectly consumer पे 10% हटा दिया. Exempt है तो this 10% is not there. So the price of the product will be 130. Is not getting exempt में he is not getting input tax credit. He is not getting input tax credit. This is why the product cost is 110 and not 100. अगर उसको 10 रुपए मिले होते तो product price would be less. He did not get the 10. Basic idea, only the end consumer is being benefit that he doesn't have to pay tax. यहाँ पे पूरी chain में से embedded price ही हटा रहे हैं. So anyway, this is why the product still remains expensive.
So what is the real benefit of this GST here?
I can have two regimes. In one regime, I'm saying I'll not pay input tax credit. In one, I'm paying input tax credit. I'm explaining the two regimes that are present. So if the government says it is GST exempt, that means only the end is exempt. The whole chain is not getting input tax credit.
Comparatively, this idea is good.
This is good.
Okay.
If you want to remove the tax burden. This is why exports are zero rated.
Right.
In this case, I sold the product for 100 and gave 10% tax on A. B got it for 110 and he added value of 20. I gave the 10 rupees back to him.
Yes.
The product is of
120.
and I am saying there is no tax on this. Product is of 120. In this case, I am saying 100 plus 10. This is the tax A has to pay. 110 from goes to B. He adds value of 20. He sells it for
130.
so he will have to pay
130.
130. The government will take 130. The consumer will take 130. तो दोनों केस में कौन सा better हुआ if you want to reduce the tax?
GST.
Zero rated.
Zero rated.
Zero rated versus exempt.
Right.
कर रहा है वो महंगा.
वो supply chain वाला benefit नहीं है. See, there is no specific benefit which we are trying to give. For example, government said कि कल से इस product पे GST नहीं होगा. Doesn't mean पूरी supply chain में input tax credit देंगे. There are two regimes, one for when we say zero rated and the other is saying exempt. This is GST exempt means end producer is not, end consumer will not pay anything and the input tax credit will not be paid. So we are not talking about benefit or loss. ये fact है. इससे हो क्या रहा है वो कुछ नहीं बात कर रहे हैं. This is just a fact. इसका analysis नहीं कर रहे क्या होना चाहिए. इससे अच्छा तो ये बोलो 28% GST क्यों है. This you can say कि why is the mobile phone being charged at 18% when the same mobile phone is bought by a rich person also and the poor also. तो 18 क्यों है, 0 करो. Same you are asking here कि tax क्यों ले रहे हो. मैंने exempt कर दिया, input tax credit नहीं दिया. It's a fact. I'm just explaining the meaning of the terms. Analysis is a different thing. You can say so many things कि 5 क्यों है. 4 rate और होने चाहिए. Those could be so many things. Then we can analyze all of the impacts of that. Right now we're just explaining the meaning of the term zero rated and exempt. That's the only fact you need to understand. Exports are zero rated. Even if exports, any in the supply chain had paid taxes, even if not GST, कोई और भी tax pay किया है exporter ने, that will be returned. GST में the exporter, the whole chain gets benefit, but also if other taxes are paid by the exporter, the indirect taxes, they will be returned to him. So that competitiveness remains. This is a very important scheme. Replace the previous schemes. The new trade policy has this scheme and not that? बिल्कुल यही है, बोला जा नहीं सकता, यही है. This is what I'm explaining. This is not something you are inferring. This is the fact. Is the idea clear? Zero rated versus exempt. क्रूड ऑयल एक्सपोर्ट नहीं होता है, अलाउड नहीं है, पहले ही नहीं है हमारे पास, हम एक्सपोर्ट क्यों करेंगे? प्रोसेसिंग है तो पेट्रोलियम के ऊपर जीरो रेटेड इफ इट इज एक्सपोर्ट. Exports all are zero rated. Domestic pay you will have petroleum, you will have to pay excise and VAT. Those exports are completely zero rated. कुछ भी export होगा. You understand, if we are trying to impose tax on exports, that means we are already killing its competitiveness. What is the idea of indirect tax? What is the idea? Idea of indirect tax is what? That the government said that manufacturer will pay. This is the incidence of the tax, or sorry, impact of the tax. Government levied the tax on A, but he sold it to consumer, so he included the price of the tax. The incidence is on consumer. Now what you are doing is you are saying this consumer is rest of the world. Do you want to push the price for them? Already export competitive is not there. तो जो चीज़ $1 की थी वो $1.5 की हो गई because government ने मुझसे tax collect करना है. अगर I have to pay to the government, I will take from him. If I take from him, the product competitiveness goes, and therefore the export quantity will go down. This is why exports are zero rated. पूरी chain में वो product price नहीं बढ़े इसलिए input tax credit देंगे. Forget just GST. Exporter pays any type of tax, indirect tax. He will be returned all taxes, duties, any type of fees he's paid, duty, not fees. He will have to return it. Government returns it so that competitiveness for this consumer remains, because this consumer is not your domestic consumer. This consumer can buy from number of other producers. So why would you want to push your price only for some small tax? Is the idea clear? In fact, the government used to think about imports from the same perspective. Consider now this consumer is domestic. So what we used to do is, we used to apply a very significant amount of import duty. Recently, the government has made a statement that we will not treat import duty as from the perspective of tax collection. We are going to treat import on the basis of what competitiveness it brings to our consumer or producer. हम उसको taxation source देख रहे थे, इसलिए हमारे पास problem बनी. Now we will not see import duty as a taxation source. Is the idea of GST clear? One nation, one tax, no problems anywhere in the supply chain.
Like supply chain के लोगों को benefit देना या consumer को?
दोनों को. If supply chain is getting the input tax credit, the price of the product is reducing. So the cascading. In fact, this is what the small change has been made. Now from the value chain, if you are in GST and you are without GST, the price of the final product will reduce. What if the government gave the input tax credit and the price did not reduce? What if the input tax credit was paid and still the price was not reduced? This is called as profiteering. This is where a change has been introduced. Which is the agency which will hear the complaints for profiteering? It was earlier the National Anti-Profiteering Agency. This is now gone. It is the Competition Commission of India. If after paying input tax credit, you do not get the price shift from the consumer, Competition Commission of India is going to look in all complaints. कि product सस्ता नहीं हुआ है even after the input tax credit was paid. Otherwise issues there are significant in this also, but this is the idea of anti-profiteering and Competition Commission. This is a recent change which has been made. Are the broad ideas of GST clear?
Sir, what is the parameter for differentiate the product on the basis of exempt and zero rated?
On what basis can you say this product is this or not? It's only government autonomy. Government decides we want to do exempt, we want to do zero rated, the government can decide for any good. For example, you can ask the same question, why some product is 5% and some product is 12? Same thing. I can decide whether it is 0 or 5. यही classification errors में तो problem है.
Parameter, this means?
No specific objective parameter. The idea broadly for giving 4 slabs or zero rated or exempt is to provide relief to the consumer. Whenever you reduce the indirect tax, you want to push your consumption expenditure. This is why you want to reduce the products. You want to reduce or increase the consumption expenditure tax come. For example, if there is a certain amount of crisis in the country, recession हो रहा है. How do you push the consumer spending? if you have a slowdown in the economy, and this is what happened in 2008, we had a significant slowdown which was coming because of the global financial crisis. If your GDP slows down, what impact can you create here? What can the government or the RBI do can push the GDP? The government can either increase its expenditure or the government can reduce the. So if I said that this product is exempt, that means the consumer does not have to pay tax. Consumer does not have to pay tax, I am pushing my. This is what they did. Excise duty vehicles pe kam kar diya. They wanted to push the consumer spending. So the government is making a product exempt, that means they want to push the spending. They want to make it zero rated, not only they want to push the spending, they also want to provide competitiveness benefits to producers. But they can't do it for all. फिर तो टैक्स ही हटा दो, फिर घर से पैसा लाना पड़ेगा. Electoral bond. In fact, electoral bond is not for government, it is for political parties. At the end of the day, government, this is what we discussed in detail yesterday, that where are the government sources of revenue? The problem is, where are the government sources of revenue? If borrowing is something which you have to take, how will you service the debt if you don't have sources for income? And major source of income is not non-tax, it is tax only. Indirect tax an important part. Is the idea clear? GST and basic features. Widening tax base. This topic is mostly important for mains. That why we should have a direct tax collection. Why direct taxes are better than indirect? Because indirect can be shifted, and if it is shifted, that means everyone is paying the same tax irrespective of their income. One of the principles of designing a taxation system is you should design a taxation system based on ability to pay. Those who have a higher ability to pay should be paying more. Those who have less, they should be paying less. This is why we have slab-based system for direct taxes. Indirect taxes, it is the same. That means poor is paying more as a percentage of their income in tax money as compared to the rich. The same thing why we need to widen the tax base is because India collects a significant amount of taxes from indirect sources. Direct tax collection is not very good in India. This is what they are trying to explain here with certain facts. What is the concept of angel tax? And what are the changes introduced in angel tax last year? See, few things just feature-wise you need to know. The idea of angel tax is any company can get money from venture capital fund. Now this is the formal route. Or it can get from this is also import. But we don't have export income. Nobody outside is preparing for UPSC. Company. This company is getting money from formal sources, or it is getting money from high net worth individuals who are called as angel investors. Not every time angel investors will be organized. They are mostly unorganized also, informal entities. Venture capitalist fund we'll just discuss. It's a proper alternate investment fund. In fact, ye bhi hote hain, but mostly otherwise also they can give. Now what the government says is, whenever these high net worth individuals give money to the company, the shares which they are getting, the value is quite high. If the original value of the company is say 100 crores, they sell the shares at 200 crores. Value is quite high. That means there is some sort of money laundering happening. Why? Because real value of the share should be less based on this value. But you are giving them more, that means इन्होंने सारा पैसा white कर लिया अपना यहाँ. They bought one good which was worth say 10 rupees per share. They are getting it at 100 rupees. That means they have got significant income. एक शेयर की वैल्यू थी 10 rupees, but I issued that one share at 100. Government says the extra valuation which you did on this 90 rupees, we will collect a tax. Very easy money laundering. This is why you see people buy paintings. ये नहीं आर्ट का शौक है, ये बताने के लिए पेंटिंग 100 करोड़ की है. This is where you can hide your money. Same thing you can do here also. Now what the government says, we are going to estimate the fair value. We are going to tell what the fair value is. And if you paid got more than fair value, we are going to collect a tax on that. This is called as angel tax. Now what changes have been brought in angel tax? Earlier, this angel tax was applicable only on those high net worth individuals or those companies when you were taking money from domestic investors. Last year, even foreign investors will have to pay. If you're taking money from foreign investors, then also you're applicable for angel tax. This is the change introduced in the last year budget. One exception, which is also true for both. If you are giving money to a company which has been registered under the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, if the company is registered here, then there is no tax. If the company is registered with the government, it's a government recognized startup. That means you are registered with the Department of Promotion for Industry and Internal Trade, there will be no tax liability on you. This has been recently also in September or October. The indirect taxes board, the direct taxes, they had issued a notification to all of their officers. If the company you have a registration with this, you will not claim any tax liability from them. See, this is considered as a very bad thing for outside investments, because how exactly will the government calculate fair value? According to government, every startup is a unicorn. तो आप fair value करोगे कैसे? फिर आपके लिए सारा पैसा ही laundering है और आप tax collect करोगे. But the government says if you are registered here, we will trust and therefore we will have no tax demand. Two changes. In fact, not two changes, only one change, that even foreign investors, if you are taking money, you will have to pay angel tax. The exemption was already provided to domestic investors, it is also provided to foreign. If you have given money to a government registered company. Registered only that you are registering, you're starting a company.
Listed companies के बारे में
Listed is
बताना
you
वो-
go into the stock exchange.
So angel tax just register करने के बावजूद भी
नहीं होगा.
नहीं होगा.
If the government knows you are existing, the government knows you are registering on the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, the same registration here, we will not be collecting tax. When this company is not registered, that means the government does not know about it. And the government now comes to know money has come. Then we will take a tax from you.
Fine.
Listing is going to the public to raise money. This is without going to the public also I can raise money. In fact, अभी लोग इनको पैसे क्यों देंगे? Startup है. They don't have a proven model. They don't know what they're going to sell. Why will public give them money? Why the bank will give them money? They don't have collateral. They don't have money. They will either get here or here. यही तो लोग देखते हैं. Shark Tank क्या बोल रहा है वो? In fact, they are also doing a very smart thing now. Shark Tanks, they are thinking, they know that इसका revenue ज़्यादा नहीं, इनसे पैसे ले रहे हैं हम, shares मिल रहे हैं, shares की value नहीं बढ़ेगी. Now they are demanding royalty. They are saying revenue पे भी percentage दो. Now this is a very exploitative step. You are taking money from revenue itself. Forget profits. Share तो आपका बढ़ेगा value में. This is why you are investing. This is the whole idea of investment, that you can spot ideas which can grow big. And this is why you take the benefit in the value of shares. मैंने पहले ही benefit ले ली पैसे छुपाने के लिए. Government says in दोनों का difference पे you'll have to pay a tax. What money you got? Is the idea of angel tax clear? One product was worth of 1,000 rupees. I am telling I bought it for 1 crore rupees. तो आपने पूरा वाइड कर लिया ना, वो उसकी वैल्यू तो थोड़ी थी इतनी. So this complete money is coming, the government does not know the source, this is what you are getting for that same amount. Same, this is happening here. Is the idea of angel tax? Two facts only. Angel tax is applicable to both domestic and foreign, and exempt if they are recognized with the government, if the company is recognized with the government. The government will calculate what the fair value is of the share. Official stats, characteristics of core stats, this is not a very important topic because ये वैसे भी draft policy है. So very less probability of you getting a question from this. So you can skip this topic, just read from the top. Next is your periodic labor force survey. Two things to take from here. One is you should know what are the basic features of PLFS and the recent trends. The last 3 years to 5 years. 17 से report आ रही है. What exactly has happened in the last 3 years? This I have presented in the same tables just like yesterday. You go through the tables, I'll just explain the classification. Now PLFS, this is the only report which measures employment, unemployment in India. Before PLFS, we had the NSSO's employment, unemployment survey. This used to happen every 5 years. Now there are 3 data points for knowing the employment, unemployment. One is the PLFS periodic labor force survey, which happens every year. The second, what are the sources for understanding employment, unemployment in India? One source is this, PLFS annual. अगर होगा तो पता चलेगा. What else? WPR, what is that? I mean, that is one of the indicators, data points. We have number of surveys conducted by the Labour Bureau. There are 5 surveys which the Labour Bureau has started, covering certain small segments. Certain domestic workers, transporters, professional workers, certain 5 surveys which the Labour Bureau conducts. But major source of data for employment, unemployment is PLFS. Now PLFS collects data for employment, unemployment on 2 different indicators. For urban areas, it provides annual and also there are quarterly data. That means we are covering both usual status and current weekly status. For rural data, there's only one visit. Question is asked only once. And therefore we have only the usual status. Periodic labor force survey conducted by the National Statistical Organization. Every year they present data on employment, unemployment. Urban areas, there are total 4 visits every quarter, current weekly and also usual status. Rural, it is only 1 visit, that is the usual status. The idea of this usual status current weekly is clear. What exactly do we do? Any employment, unemployment survey will be based on the activity status of the person. Activity status is during the last period, whatever the time reference is, what was the activity status with respect to participation in the economy. The participation in the economy, what exactly the status was in a particular time period. What exactly was the person doing in a particular time period? That is the activity status of a person. Based on the time period, there are 3 types of activity status. One is the usual status. The usual status, the activity status is checked across a reference period of 1 year, the last 1 year. So the question posed is, what were you doing in the last 1 year, whether you were within the labor force or outside the labor force? The question is asked on this. The population, whatever the sample size we are choosing, the question is posed whether you were part of the labor force, that is, whether you were willing and able to work, or you were out of labor force, that is, not willing to work. If the answer to this is willing and able to work, that means second question, did you find work or you were unemployed? Few rates which we mentioned, the ratios. The labor force participation rate is total labor force upon the population. The worker population ratio is total workers upon not labor force population. And unemployment rate is unemployed as a percentage of labor force. Proportion unemployed is unemployed upon total population. These are the ratios which will be given by any survey which is conducted for employment and unemployment. Labor force participation rate, out of the total population, how many were looking for work. Worker population ratio, out of the total population, how many got work. And unemployment rate, unemployed as a percentage of labor force. These are the ratios which we calculate using any survey. And we ask questions based on what they were doing in the time period. Usual status is based on 1 year. Now during that 1 year, what was the major activity was being done where you spent maximum time? What do we mean by maximum time? If you are spending more than 182 days, that becomes your principal status. There is another minor activity which you have done for at least 30 days. Cutoff is at least 30 days. Major activity की है और minor भी की है at least for 30 days. That becomes your subsidiary status. And PLFS will always give usual status both principal plus subsidiary. So what were you doing in the previous 1 year? Major time, principal status. Minor activity, what is the minor activity done for more than 30 days? If the time reference is 1 week, this is current weekly status. When is a person considered employed in current weekly? When the cutoff is 1 hour. And the third is current daily status. In India, we only have current weekly for urban. Usual status is for both urban and rural. Daily status mein just 1 day before what you were doing. So what the question is, in the last 7 days, har din kya kiya? If you had work for 0 to 4 hours, this will be counted half person day work. If it is 4 hours plus, it will be counted as 1 day work. This approach is used to calculate the quantity of work created. How much person days work was created. These two are mostly for employment measurement. You can count the quantity through current weekly also. Person weeks, person days. Is the idea clear? And LFPR, WPR and proportion employed and unemployment rate. Is the broader idea clear what PLFS does? It's an annual survey where we visit the urban areas 4 times a year, where you visit the rural areas only once. So only usual status from rural areas, because you're going only once, you would know only what you did in the previous 1 week. Current weekly, because we can update पिछले week क्या है, उसे seasonal work का idea लग सकता है when you're visiting 4 times. Now what is the data what we have got from this? One of the most surprising data what we have got. And one more thing. When the person is employed, what are the categories of employment? If the workers found work, what are the categories of employment? Because what India has witnessed is, from 2018 till date, we have witnessed a very significant rise in women labor force participation rate. 23 se 37 as recorded by PLFS. What are the categories of employment? One is regular or the salaried work. Regular will always have a salary. Then you have contractual work, and the third is self-employed. These are the maximum in India. We'll show with data also. Semi-employed has 3 categories. One, those who create jobs, employers. Second, those who work without paid help, the own account workers. And the third is household helper. This is the area where we have the maximum women. This is the work which is unpaid. Regular salaried is the least. Second contract, first is self-employed. Unme maximum are own account. This is the categories of employment. So you have data across activity status, rural, urban, male, female, and you have employment data. These are the data which you have to analyze, because you can get a question on the trends. Is the idea clear? Now what exactly are the trends which we have witnessed? This is your labor force participation rate, 2023, 21 and 20. This year report has analyzed for 3 years what the labor force participation rate has been. You just need to be careful with one thing, that different data points are mentioning different data because they are mentioning 2 things. Either they are mentioning all ages or they are mentioning 15 years and above. In दोनों data points में हमेशा problem आएगी, because 15 years and above is only calculating both the ratios in 15 years and above. But all ages में आपका employment unemployment इतना नहीं होगा जितना all ages में population बढ़ जाएगी. This is why the labor force participation rate for rural total person is 60%, but all ages is 43. Rural female 41.5, it was 36.6 in the previous years, if you compare 15 years and above. Is the idea clear? 15 years and above, when you see, when your labor force participation rate is labor force upon 1, I am including only 15 years and above. The other I am including all ages. So which percentage will be, population will be more? तभी ये number में difference है. Is the idea clear? Most of the data points will actually give this 15 years and above because we consider working age population as 15 years and above. And if you want to check for youth population, that is 15 to 29. All the data is being presented across 3. This is the data which you can use. 15 years and above, the male total rural and urban participation is 78.5, female is 37, total is 57.9. And the government only considers 2 genders, male and female. तीसरे gender का नाम ही नहीं है. This is a surprising thing. At least from the government forms, it should be all genders. It's only male and female. And one more surprising thing is they don't count 2 activities as economic activity, begging and prostitution. Begging and prostitution are not counted as economic activities, though they are legal. Both are legal, but they're not counted as economic activities. वो third gender इसलिए नहीं count कर रहे because maximum employment is there only. Male 78.5, female is 37. Significant difference. India is, the problem of GDP is half of the population is not participating in the labor force. And this is where you have given the Nobel Prize for understanding the women participation in the labor force. This is a very probable question, understanding the female labor force participation rates, not just in prelims, but also in mains. Why India has poor female labor force participation. And even if it has increased from 23 to 37, what are the cause of increase and where it has increased? It's mostly unpaid help. The worker population rate, the same LFPR worker population rate. This is your category of employment. You can see what helper in household for female in rural areas. 43%, very less in urban areas. Feminization of agriculture in low-level works, 43% female. This is for this year. Other tables have also given the comparative. So you can draw the analysis. What has happened in the last 3 years? Maximum is this in helper. Regular salary and casual labor, you can see the percentage. So maximum is this. In fact, total if you count self-employed, maximum employment comes in self-employed only. This is your 2021, 42%, 42%, 12.4 in urban areas. Urban areas is roughly very less. More is in rural. वहीं से majorly we have seen the increase in the female labor force participation rate. This is your distribution of workers, rural male and rural female. Self-employed, you can see the number. Compare the salaried, 8% as compared to 14.3. In India, mostly what is important is quality of employment. Quantity of employment because you will have to work. Because we are in a market economy, all of the goods are available in the private sector, support from the government is very less. Therefore, you have to work. Number of unemployment will always be less. You will have to find work. So quality matters more. Where most of the people are, which sector has the maximum? Which sector has the maximum employment in India? Services. 45.8. Maximum is in agriculture. Very less in manufacturing and services. दोनों का roughly half ही है. 26, 27, both of them. Maximum is in agriculture. So again, these are all of the data points which you can use in your mains answer. Because there's always a problem, how do you estimate India's growth or employment? This is the only official data that the government uses. The CMIE data, the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, the government does not accept that data. So the one data point authentic which you can use your answers for mains analysis is only PLFS. PLFS says 45.8% is in agriculture, we go by these numbers only. And trends, if the government asks, or the UPSC asks from this, it will be PLFS only. If there are trends asked in employment, unemployment. This is regarding your PLFS, a rough comparison, roughly employment in same agriculture, manufacturing and services. Percentage of, just a point for your mains answer, percentage of regular salaried employees who had no written job contract. This whole data point is talking about social security of employment. Regular salaried who did not have written job contract, percentage of salaries who were not eligible for paid leave, and percentage of regular salaried who did not have any special social security benefit. So this is talking about the vulnerability of employment even when you are regular salaried. So all of these data points for analysis in mains. Very less probability that this in-depth question will come from prelims. Prelims mein major you should know what PLFS does and the broader trends of labor force participation rate and worker population rates. Those broader ideas. Unemployment rates have drastically reduced, 6% roughly, both usual status and current weekly status. It's come down to very less to 2.4. Last year 3.3, 3.3 before that. So unemployment rates in India will never be high because you have to find work. You've already seen unpaid household work is also classified as employment. This is with respect to PLFS. Unemployment rates across the three, only current status, not current, usual status. This is across social groups because there is a lot of news about the caste census. So you have probability of question in paper 1 or paper 3. So you should some idea about unemployment, employment across categories. Though they have done it through religion also, but mostly categories are important. The first topic in the first chapter, society, paper 1. Is the idea clear what PLFS has to be done? PLFS the basic idea and what the rates are, same as CSTs. Coming back to next. Is the idea clear what you have to do from the PLFS survey? Nobel Prize in Economics, Women and Labor Force. Broader idea what the contribution was. The contribution was 1. This is the contribution. Mostly important for mains only. This is the contribution. No consistent association between economic development and women participation in labor force. Even though the U-shaped curve is given, here also there are inconsistencies. There is no direct relationship between economic growth and female labor force participation rate. There are much other factors which are cause for low female labor force participation rate despite economic growth. Now what could be the reasons why despite economic growth there is no labor force participation rate for females? She identified 4 reasons. One is social norms associated to responsibilities mostly on females. So even if economic growth is there, the responsibility, social norms of both marriage and childbirth, the responsibility is mostly of females. And this responsibility is what compromises their participation. Even after this, there is a supporting environment. What she found out was why people were not participating, because people did not have the same, or females did not have the same aspirations. Because what they had seen in their household was that females were doing only one work. So the aspirations for career was also not there because in the family participation was not. So even if the employment economic growth was increasing, the participation will not increase. Another reason why I said it was not increasing, because when women participated in agriculture, the salary that was received was per output of or per work done. The money was received based on the manual labor that was done. But as soon as they reach industry, what happens is work is paid according to fixed salaries. And when you're charging fixed salaries or you're giving fixed salary to the employees, women were discriminated as compared to men. Because the employers thought they would not be able to take much work from women. This is why the amount of work taken from women will be less, so they were not given equal salaries. So in the same position, if you're not giving equal salaries, women will drop out of labor force. The reason one was the societal expectations from marriage and childbirth, which also impacted the aspirations. However, the situation will change when you are moving up the ladder. Why? Because women can participate in certain specific services. And what she found out was women were participating in or medicine. Certain specific services where the women labor force participation rate is increasing. Further, what impacted their participation when it transitioned from industry to service was that there was significant developments in technology. More control over marriage and childbirth through contraceptive pills. More control over childbirth, that means there was more control over their career. They understand there will be a gap in the career when they will participate here, and females have to make more, take more responsibility. But still they had more control over childbirth, and this is why the participation was still increasing as delayed childbirth happened or less of child rearing practices done by women. Zyada bachche se kam because contraceptive pills become easily available. So she explained what are the reasons that hold back women participating in the economy. What the idea was, if there will be growth, this will happen. That is not true. Even U-shaped curve mein, it depends on what the society thinks. 3 factors mostly important: how you are paying the salary, the gender pay gap. What exactly is the expectations from women, what type of work, and second, what exactly is the availability of technology, how much control they have over various life processes. This is the contribution. These frameworks you can use for writing answers in mains, because this is a very probable question: why women labor force participation rate is poor in India. Is the idea clear? Gig economy, mostly important for mains also. You have a rough idea about gig economy? What is gig economy? Broader definition of gig economy. Contractual. Is it contractual? What is the broader idea? Contractual is one part of gig. It's not all gig. Freelancing, again contract. Where you are paid per unit of work. This is the idea of a gig worker. It can include 2 types of services: the platform gig workers, working for a platform, and non-platform gig workers. Non-platform gig workers include all freelancers and casual contract workers. Everyone is a gig worker. Contract labor is all of gig work. Paid per unit of work. No regular salary. The whole idea, we discussed self-employed and we discussed salaried plus casual. Salaried छोड़ के mostly will be gig workers. Paid per unit of work. Self-employed क्योंकि खुद के लिए काम कर रहे हैं, they are not gig. When they are working for someone else, that will be gig. Is the idea clear? What are the issues they face? Broader. One is that they don't have fixed wages. There's no salary concept. There's no fixed wage. Then no social security benefits. In fact, just 2 slides back we had seen that regular salaried work में भी social security नहीं है. So they also have no social security provisions. What else? Social recognition. What do you mean by social recognition? Status नहीं है. किस काम में है? नहीं, कौन सी जॉब सिक्योर है? ये सिक्योर है. What is secure? तभी पढ़ रहे हो PT-365. वो सिक्योरिटी चाहिए. You are working for this, not for this. वो तो पता है कमा लोगे इसके बाद. What else? What is the biggest problem with gig workers? These are known facts. What is the biggest problem which we need to address holistically? What is the biggest problem with gig workers? Especially the type of employment. See, potential and all you can discuss, के benefits भी हैं, के choice है. That you have the choice whether you want to work or not. What is the biggest issue? And all of these 3 things are being tackled if you just read the Rajasthan bill on gig workers. This has provided number of benefits, but it is still not tackling one major thing, which is the biggest problem with gig workers. Casualty. Casualty is this only, social security. What do you understand by social security? What is social security? Insurance. क्यों insurance? Concept क्या है social security का? Certainty. The whole idea of social security is, at any point of time you face certain risks which are way beyond your control. There are certain risks which you can face. For example, what if you lose your job? What if you meet with an accident? What if there is a natural calamity? All of these risks are something which is way beyond the capacity of an individual. Now, when you face certain risks, these risks materializes, the protection comes only from the society. Now, society, what type of protection? For example, society is first family. Then you have the community. But problem इसमें है, ज़रूरी नहीं है help करे. Though it is expected कि family help करेगी जब चोट लग जाएगी. But it's discretional. Not everyone might have the family or the community support. There's one support which you'll get always, that is from the state. This is why you have social security scheme, Atal Pension Yojana. You have unemployment benefits, for example, Manrega. You have number of social security schemes which the state is distributing, so that you have certain risk which you can't control, which is way beyond your control whenever it materializes. The state is going to ensure that whenever this risk materializes, your standard of living is not eroded. इसीलिए concept है pension का. concept is of insurance. For example, all casual workers are entitled to EPFO. What is the basis of having an organization? The Employee Provident Fund organization is nothing but to provide social security. That if there is any risk, the state is going to help you. Old age pensions, widow pensions, all of these are part of the social security schemes of the government to protect standard of living from events which are way beyond your control. Not contingent on support coming from family or community. वो करेंगे help definitely, even if they're not, the state is going to help you. This is the biggest problem in the work created in India, that maximum workers, even when they are regular salaried, they don't have any social security. If the job is lost, what is the social security net do you have? And this is the reason why unemployment rates in India are very low, because people can't afford to remain out of work. They will postpone their medical expenses or any other expenses because they have to find their next meal. There is no social security. The same thing does not happen in developed countries. People will not be forced to work because there is social security programs of the government. If you live in India, you can always hire a driver for 15,000, a maid for 2,000. Same thing go in US, you will not be find any work at any cost. The cost would be very high because all of these are specialized skills. वहाँ पे आप नहीं लोगों से काम करा सकते इतने कम में. वहाँ पे they have social security benefits which they are getting, same in UK. अब वहाँ नहीं करवा सकते इसलिए इंडिया वाले लोग वहाँ जाके same करेंगे. This is what is happening in Canada. Do you think Canada is producing skill job? Canada doesn't have population. It's not producing any skill job. It's not a very developed nation. It's just that social security benefits are huge. So who's available for doing the low skilled works? It's mostly population coming from outside. If you have good social security here, people will not work at low cost. This is what happened when Manrega became a legal right. The cost in agriculture for labor increased significantly. You were getting the work done by labor at very less cost, but now they know they have an option in Manrega. Why will they work in your field for less cost? The worker wages increased in agriculture. This is because the social security benefits are strong. This is why unemployment rates are not high in India, because people are forced to work. Agar support system strong ho, you will see high unemployment rates. Now see which states are showing high unemployment rates. One of the most progressive states got benefit from Green Revolution. Haryana is showing more than 30% unemployment rates. Why? Because they have a very strong social security. And it's not coming from state, it is coming from family and community. This is why people can afford to remain without work. So what explains why this state is showing? Same thing will not come from the least developed states, because people are migrating out for work irrespective of what quantity they get and what the job condition is. इसलिए लोग फंसते हैं यूए जाके. They've been sent on contracts. Why do you think people are lining up for fighting it or working in Israel? All of those lineups are done because यहाँ पे social security नहीं है. There's no job, then where exactly will people go? In fact, yesterday, if you read the news, Hindu has reported number of people are stuck fighting for Russia in the Russia-Ukraine war. They were told they will be helpers for army. वहाँ 2 लोग मर भी चुके हैं. They were told to fire. So this is what is the situation if you don't provide good social security. So gig workers is a very big problem of social security. But what is the biggest problem beyond this? ये general idea social security का इंडिया में strong नहीं है. Financial stability, wages are not regular. What's the biggest problem? And this is the problem which Niti Aayog has talked about, and talked about a feature called Platform India. Platform India, they're talking about providing 2 things to gig workers. After recognition, they're talking about provision of two things. One is provision of capital and the provision of skill. Because the biggest problem with gig worker is, what is your promotional avenue? You deliver food or you are working for Uber, what is your promotional avenue? How are you going to go ahead in life? Because whatever the benefit is, the platform, see how platform will get rich. Platform is having certain people who are sellers, and there are certain people who are buying, they are consumers. Platform is only using the gig workers to connect these two and is paying per unit of work done. Now consider from the perspective of gig worker. Who brings the bike or who brings all of the machinery for work? It's completely out of the pocket of the gig worker. But who takes the profit of the business? Who gets all the data from the business which they can also sell to other companies and use for better targeting of consumers? So neither the seller is getting rich, consumer is still getting service. ये worker को कुछ नहीं मिल रहा है. 2023, 30 rupees per meal. 2053, 50 rupees per meal. That will be the only difference. And Zomato, and this is how Amazon went from the normal bookseller to the largest company of the world by collecting all data. Delivery boys नहीं कभी rich होंगे. company is going to grow rich at the cost of this labor by building one platform. So सारे network benefits इनके हैं, इनको कोई benefit नहीं है out of any service which the platform sells. There's no sharing of revenue in any cost or any revenue sources which this platform has. Whether they are selling more ads for seller. For example, Zomato will always push certain products up, promoted ad. When you are making payments, it is linking to the banks for providing certain coupons so that you can get that credit card, and if you take the credit card, benefit for the company. So whether it is getting money from the sellers for promoting the products, gig workers are not getting anything. So they're not just fighting for a wage, they're also fighting for benefits coming out from this platform business. Sustainability is not just sustaining the same wage, it's about what exactly is the future. This is what Niti Aayog said, that create a platform India portal where you are going to first register them, talk about social security, and also talk about capital and skills so that they can upskill themselves and move to higher value chain. What you have seen in India is skill work, mostly gig work is low level work. Value addition chain में low level या mid level workers हैं, high value chain में बहुत कम है. This is the biggest problem of gig workers, apart from wages and social security and all. So just read the Rajasthan bill and the Niti Aayog platform India, these things will be done. Next is incremental cash reserve ratio. What is the idea of incremental cash reserve ratio? Or CRR, what is the concept of CRR? What is the reason for having CRR in the economy? There's only one reason, that is to control the amount of credit created. Banks are getting certain deposits. Deposits of a bank are its asset or liabilities? Liabilities. These are your time and demand liabilities. That they have to keep certain part as reserves, and also rest they can give out as. The difference between the two is what the income of the bank is. This reserve in India has to be maintained in two forms, that is CRR and SLR. So the idea of reserve is only to control the money supply by controlling the credit creation. CRR and SLR, CRR is to be maintained with RBI in the form of cash and there is no interest. SLR, bank themselves in the form of cash, gold or government securities or any other approved securities by the RBI. And is there an interest? Yes, how? Is there any interest paid by any entity? If you hold it in government securities, then only you are getting interest. ऐसे कुछ RBI interest नहीं देगा दोनों पे, because the tools are for controlling the amount of loans you can create. So the purpose is credit creation, but one more thing that happens, you can also control inflation. By increasing the reserve rate, you can increase the or decrease the loans created. Is the idea clear? What is the concept of incremental CRR? What happened in the last 6 months when the government announced that the 2000 rupees note will be withdrawn? Demonetization hoga. 2000 rupees note will be withdrawn. You have 6 months to, or 3 to 4 months to return. Now when this note is withdrawn, that means the amount of deposits that will come to the banks will increase. Some people might exchange the currency, some people might deposit the money to the banks. That means the deposit will increase. The government said for certain amount of time, whatever X amount you had here, you have X plus Y here. For this period of time, you maintain CRR on X plus Y, and on Y amount you maintain incremental CRR. Whatever amount you got here, total amount pe you will have to maintain CRR. On this amount alone, you have to maintain incremental CRR. This was given out to be 10%, but only for money coming between certain time period. After that time period, you don't have to maintain this. Is the idea clear? Incremental CRR was to absorb the excess deposits coming into the banks. Now, why was the bank or why was the RBI doing this incremental CRR? Was it for inflation? Was it for inflation? Was incremental CRR for inflation? See, the biggest problem is you are getting number of deposits. The bank could have created loans. What if the deposit is reversed? At any point of time, bank does not have all the money which it is people have deposited, because we work on a system of fractional reserve. तो जितना कुछ टाइम के लिए डिपॉजिट आया ज़्यादा लोन हो गए, दिस कुड बी अ प्रॉब्लम फॉर द बैंक. So the idea of incremental CRR was not inflation, it was only to control the amount of credit created. This is a tool to control the amount of credit creation. Now, assuming that this money came for short term only, you are taking loans, you are giving loans. What if people demand the deposits? There could be liquidity pressure on the bank, which could lead to a bank run. So to control the money supply, that is to control the credit creation, the incremental CRR was used by RBI. So for a particular period of 2 months, whatever money you get, on this additional money you will have to keep incremental CRR, total money pe CRR hai hi. This is the idea of incremental CRR. Is the idea clear?
If RBI increase the CRR, they can affect household savings.
They can affect the
Household savings.
how?
तो कि बैंक जो है मतलब कि बेनिफिट कम होगा, CRR ज़्यादा रखना पड़ेगा उसको अपने पास.
So if they are giving more CRR, they will be able to do less loans. What does it have an impact on deposits? In fact, they can create conditions to have more deposits because they'll need more money for loans. It's not necessary that it will have an impact on savings. You're not impacting deposits. You are impacting this. There are two ratios, two behaviors which create money. One is the consumer behavior, currency deposit ratio. The other is the bank behavior, reserve deposit ratio. So reserve deposit ratio is what? The amount of reserves you keep as a percentage of your deposit. I am impacting this ratio. What are the reserves which the bank keep? There are two types of reserves. One is statutory reserves, which the RBI has told, CRR, SLR, plus the bank also can keep reserve extra. ये zero भी हो सकता है, ज़्यादा भी हो सकता है. This is impacting my loan creation. So what I am impacting with CRR is this. So what I am impacting is this. I am not doing anything here. Currency deposit ratio is what? What amount you hold in currency and what amount you hold in. So how is it impacting the consumer behavior? Until and unless the banks make certain changes on the deposit rates, the consumer behavior does not change. So what I'm impacting is not this, I am impacting this. Is the idea clear? Incremental CRR or SLR, all of these things are used for calculation of or creation of credit. Control the creation of credit, that is the purpose. Is the idea clear?
Sir, but increase the interest rate.
हाँ वो होगा फिर हो जाएगा. Now you added a condition. To get your answer you added a condition. तो वो allowed नहीं है ना. Is the idea clear? The concept of net time demand liability is clear. What is the concept here? Total liabilities, what the deposits are being coming to the bank. Some part of this deposit is the bank which the other banks are keeping money here. That is not included in this. And when we include this, is it only talking about deposits? This is the net time and demand liabilities. For calculation of CRR, is only net time and demand liabilities that is used. Or there is certain loan amounts also which are used. Just read about MSME loans, retail loans. If these loans are being given more, on that loans will the CRR change or not? Just read about this concept. RBI has introduced certain changes. A special CRR, what exactly is the condition? Special conditions हैं 3 टाइप के. अगर आप लोन्स करोगे वो मनी फॉर डिपॉजिट का काउंट नहीं होगा CRR में. Just read about this. Automobile, it's retail loans mostly. Automobile is part of retail loans. Home loans, retail loans, and MSME. There are 3 categories. Just read on this. Is the idea clear? How the incremental CRR is calculated? What time to time regulations are of the RBI? Are these other liquidity management tools clear? One is the reserve ratio, the other is just a broad overview, liquidity management tool. Ways and means advance is not a liquidity management tool. ये नहीं है. Liquidity management tools यही हैं. What are the liquidity adjustment facilities available from the RBI? That's the policy rate, repo. The rate at which banks borrow from the RBI in exchange for securities. Repurchase the securities. Then there's a concept of reverse repo. What happens in reverse repo? This is a deposit facility, this is a loan facility. Now, is this facility available to all banks at all times? Then, First, it is available, all of this liquidity adjustment facility is available only to scheduled banks. Non-scheduled banks go only at discretion of RBI. Now for all scheduled banks, is it available every time? The RBI has made this discretionary. No longer is this available automatically. Automatic available hai SDF, standing deposit facility. What is standing deposit facility? Without collateral. तो ये automatic है, ये नहीं है. Discretion पे होगा ये. And in reverse repo, they used to conduct two operations. One was fixed repo, reverse repo rate auctions, and the other was variable. What is the difference? What is the difference between fixed reverse repo rate operations and variable reverse repo rate operations? Rate is fixed. You're good at English में CSAT में English करना. Your interpretation skills are good. But what's the criteria? This is at a fixed rate, this is a variable rate, auction होता है यहाँ पे. The banks can deposit under reverse repo only up to a fixed limit. Under this window, there is a limit, the max amount which you can give. Beyond that, if you have to give money to the RBI, there will be auctions conducted for rate. That is variable reverse repo rate operations. But these operations are now at the discretion of RBI. What is automatic is uncollateralized deposit, that is standing deposit facility. Then you have the highest marginal standing facility. What's the difference between repo and MSF? Why it's a penal rate? If the bank does not have government securities for repo, the bank then will use the securities which they had under SLR. The maximum they can use is up to 2%. And since you are using the SLR securities, you will have to pay a higher rate as compared to repo. This is the concept of marginal standing facility rate. These are your liquidity management tools from the RBI, where bank can borrow and deposit. A similar rate to MSF is bank rate. What is the difference between the two? There is no repurchase obligation in bank rate, and it's not necessarily on government securities. Any security can be discounted at bank rate. This is the discounting rate. Any security can be discounted with the RBI at bank rate. The RBI does not announce bank rate separately. After the introduction of MSF, these two rates have been aligned. Whatever will be MSF will be bank rate. So these are your windows for liquidity adjustment facility. Then you have the open market operation. What is the idea here? Buying and selling of government securities, not for management of government debt, but for inflation. It's only OMOs are done only for inflation. OMOs can also have an impact on government yield, but they do not have anything to do with yield. All they have to do is to control inflation. Ways and means advances. What is the concept of ways and means advances?
For the government, basically RBI used to print extra money to fulfill the current account deficit.
Current account deficit.
Sorry, fiscal deficit.
Fiscal deficit.
Fiscal deficit. So now the as per ways and means advance, RBI will not print the money, but RBI will give them a particular
temporary loan. Is RBI printing money for government not allowed completely? Ways and means advances was an agreement between RBI and government, just an agreement, which said if the RBI or the government wants money from the RBI, it will come as a form of a temporary loan only. Temporary loan will be charged at the repo rate, which will have to be returned. Extension hota hai, that will be treated as overdraft, and you will have to pay extra as a repo rate pay +1 or +2, right? FRBM is one which dictates this. FRBM 2003 banned the borrowing of the government from the RBI. But this act was amended in 2018, and they introduced an escape clause. So they have defined 4 conditions. When those conditions will be met, you can ask the RBI to print money. The escape clause says the government can move away from its fiscal deficit target to the tune of 0.5%. And for moving away from the target to the tune of 0.5%, they can ask the RBI to print the money for this 0.5%. So government borrowing money from the RBI can be done for financing fiscal deficit only when there is a specific condition met as per the amendment to the FRBM Act in 2018. This is the escape clause of FRBM. Is the idea clear? There's only one condition under which they can ask you print money. Otherwise, if they want to take money, it is going to come in the form of ways and means advances. Is the idea clear? Can the states take ways and means advances? Yes, for states there are two windows. One is called as the normal ways and means advances and the other is called as special. What is the difference? Limit, okay, wait. One more thing. Whenever the loan is taken, this limit is decided by whom? Between the RBI and government. If the center government is taking money, who defines the limit? It is a mutual understanding between the two. Every year they will determine ways and means ka limit. But for states, the limit will be determined by the RBI alone. जब सेंटर को लोन देना है कितनी लिमिट तक जाएगा, this will be decided by RBI and center together. But if it is given to the states, it will be decided only by the RBI. When you are giving government securities in return, you are going to get repo -1. Special, collateralized loan. When it is without, it is called as normal. Collateralized, it is special. Is the idea clear? This is also called as the SDF window. Special drawing fund or special drawing facility. This is the WMA, special WMA, which is collateralized, repo -1. SDF is standing deposit facility, bank and RBI. RBI and state government is special drawing facility, a temporary loan on the back of government securities where the rate is repo -1. Limit for both normal and special will be decided by RBI. So there are two terms here. One is a ways and means advances, which is called as the special drawing facility. And the standing deposit facility is when we are talking in context of RBI and banks. This is a deposit facility, this is a loan facility to states. So there should be no confusion. There's a special drawing facility which is nothing but special ways and means advances given by the RBI to the states in the form of a temporary loan. Limits being set by the RBI, this is collateralized, normal is not collateralized. Special drawing facility, both are SDF. Is the idea clear? Ways and नहीं, यही तो बता रहा हूँ. स्पेशल ड्राइंग सिर्फ स्टेट्स के लिए, वेज एंड मीन्स एडवांसेस गवर्नमेंट्स के लिए. एक वेज एंड मीन्स एडवांसेस है सेंटर के लिए, जिसकी लिमिट सेंटर और आरबीआई दोनों कर रहे हैं रेपो पे. इफ यू एक्सटेंड दिस बिकम्स एन ओवरड्राफ्ट फैसिलिटीज, यू हैव टू पे एक्स्ट्रा. फॉर स्टेट्स इट इज नॉर्मल एंड स्पेशल, लिमिट डिसाइडेड बाय दिस. स्पेशल इज कॉल्ड एज स्पेशल ड्राइंग फैसिलिटीज. इज द आइडिया क्लियर? Ways and means advances. Are all of these terms clear? Ways and means advances is liquidity management. It's not liquidity management for banks. It is for temporary mismatches in cash flows for center and state. The categorization here is not correct. It is not a liquidity management tool. It is a loan facility for center and state. This is for temporary mismatches for government imbalances, which they can take from RBI. And yes, RBI can print money for government only when escape clause is triggered. Till now, we have not triggered the escape clause. This 97 was an agreement, was a historic agreement between RBI and the central government. Because earlier what was happening, whenever the government incurred fiscal deficit, government was asking RBI to print money. Now, if the government is asking the RBI to print money, this can cause significant amount of... Now, how are they controlling this inflation? ये तो बहुत साल तक चला. गवर्नमेंट यूज्ड टू आस्क आरबीआई टू प्रिंट मनी. हाउ डिड दे ट्रिगर और कंट्रोल दिस इन्फ्लेशन? एट द सेम टाइम दे इंक्रीज द सीआरआर एंड एसएलआर. सो वट एवर मनी वॉज बीइंग प्रिंटेड, दैट मनी केम टू द बैंक एंड केप्ट एज रिजर्व्स. तो मार्केट में वो पैसा जाने ही नहीं दिया. दिस वॉज केप्ट टू रफली 50%. CRR was somewhere around 15-16%, 35% was SLR. So whatever money got extra released in the market, banks had to keep that money. So we controlled some sort of inflation. This is how government was managing both the things at the same time. 97, an agreement got reached between the two, government and RBI, ways and means advances. FRBM 2003 clearly said 2006 के बाद RBI will not take the primary issuances of government for fulfilling debt. 2006, this was implemented. 2018, after enkissing panel, the amendment was made that whenever the escape clause will be triggered, government can ask the RBI to print money. Pandemic was one such situation. But the government did not do it because the government was fearful of inflation. Because already the economy was facing a supply side shortage. On top of it, if you print more money, you could have runaway inflation. लोन्स, हाँ बहुत मुश्किल था. लोन के इंटरेस्ट रेट वैसे भी बिफोर 93, 91, 93 RBI used to decide for banks. Only after 93 the prime lending rate, the concept was introduced where banks were given freedom that 2 लाख से ऊपर का लोन आप प्राइस कर सकते हो. Otherwise all loans and deposit rates was decided by RBI. This is why Narasimham Committee report liberalized the interest rates, let them decide on their own. Next is surplus transfer. In fact, if you see before 91, you don't have private banks. सारी banking activity the government है. All of the banks have nationalized. 93 में they have given 10 license for private banks where the competition came in. Then converted the ICICI Bank from this NBFC, that is Developmental Financial Institution, into a commercial bank, private. ICICI was already a private World Bank promoted body. IDBI was converted into a commercial bank. Very less activity in the banking sector. Surplus transfer. What is the idea of surplus transfer? Why should the RBI give money to the government? Why is the RBI giving money to the government? RBI is a government body. The whole idea is, why was the RBI created? What is the function of RBI? The function of the RBI is, see, monetary policy is no longer the domain of RBI. Monetary policy is the domain of Monetary Policy Committee, of which RBI is a part. What the central bank has to do is maintain the value of rupee. Monetary stability, though it is related, but now it has, the concept has evolved. Concept has evolved to Monetary Policy Committee. The stability अकेला RBI का domain नहीं है. Now when the RBI does this, that is when the RBI performs the function of issuer of currency, RBI in turn gets certain money. For example, if you just study what the asset or liability structure of RBI is. What is the asset for RBI? Central bank के assets क्या हैं? One we discussed, foreign currency assets they have. They have significant foreign currency assets. They have gold and they have government security, or if they have given loans to government or given to banks, these two facilities we just discussed. All of these are assets to RBI. What is the liability to RBI? One is the capital, paid up capital with which RBI started. That is the liability. What else? Currency with the public. What else? If they have deposits from either the government or bank. And they also keep certain amount of money as reserves. Now there are 3 types of major reserves, 2 mostly important for our discussion. One is asset development, the other is contingency fund, and the third is currency and gold revaluation account. What is mostly important is these 2. Now if you see the whole balance sheet of RBI, on the asset side, does RBI earn income? It is issuing government security, or it is getting interest on government security. And in foreign currency asset, does it have income? On what head? Foreign currency asset 3 form में है. एक तो currency रखी है. One they have kept foreign government securities, and the third they have kept deposits with central bank or other commercial bank outside India. These 2 are income generating. This is income generating. What is the liability which is taking money away from RBI? Paid up capital, currency. Between currency and government security, this is the idea of seigniorage. Remember we discussed this concept, cost of printing money. You have negligible, this is a 0 interest liability. Currency is 0 interest liability. And also when the currency says, I promise to pay the bearer, is this promise holding true? What does the note mean? I promise to pay the bearer a sum of this. What does this mean? It has no face value. Will the RBI give you certain value? In what form is it going to give you value? Gold. Are you getting gold on currency? This promise does not have any meaning. 1957, India moved from a proportional reserve. We had a proportional reserve where we could print only currency which was backed by 40% gold. Now we don't follow proportional, we follow minimum reserve. 200 crores पे we can print any amount. Out of this 115 crores should be gold. The moment we shifted here, this promise does not hold any meaning. पहले एटलीस्ट ये था उतनी वैल्यू का गोल्ड होगा, उतनी वैल्यू का 40% मिल जाएगा. But now we are not following this. IMF allowed most of the currencies to move away from backing. They have minimum backing. That means whatever paper is printed, backing सिर्फ minimum है पीछे. तो promise to pay the bearer, that means note exchange होके मिल जाएगा. That means this is a zero interest without any backing, no cost liability to the RBI. Difference between the two is what we are calling as seniorage. This is what we discussed. कल SDR में seniorage सबको मिलेगा, सिर्फ US को नहीं. But if consider the Central Bank of India only, this has less liability or absolutely no liability. This is no liability. The only liability is, that means I have significant amount of income. Sources asset पे income है, liability पे cost नहीं है. That means RBI every year is earning income. Now all of this income, should the RBI be earning income? RBI is not a commercial body. That means RBI was never created as something which can create income or profit. If RBI is not a commercial body, RBI is owned by the government. Is it completely owned by the government? Yes or no? 1948, RBI was nationalized, 100% owned by the government. So if there's no commercial function, but as a result of monetary stability or issuer of currency, it earns a certain significant amount of income. This income, after keeping for reserves, they should transfer to the government. This is what is called as the surplus transfer to government. This is not called as a dividend because dividend is in the context of profits from PSU. This profit or income which the RBI earned, we don't call it as profit because there's no revenue which RBI is making. The income which RBI earns is an incidental income. We did not think about whether the income will be created or not. Incidental to its function. The income has been created. So the income will be given to the government after keeping for reserves. And the question now is, how much should the RBI keep money for reserves? How much money should go basically in these two accounts? One is called as the contingency fund and the other is currency and gold revaluation fund. This is a very tricky topic. Because currency and gold revaluation, one is आपने कुछ पैसे रखे, these are called as retained earnings. The retained earnings which you have to keep, how much they will be, because this contingency fund is something which is used for any risk the economy faces. Whether it is an external risk or a domestic problem, the RBI will always keep a reserve for any type of contingency. But this account is not for contingency. RBI is holding certain asset, for example, currency or gold. Even it is holding government securities. Now why this account is kept? Can I have adverse movements in all of these assets? For example, I am holding certain currency, but the currency lost value in future. Or the currency might gain in value in future. Same thing can happen to all of this. Now whatever assets I am holding, they are subject to change in prices. Now to manage this price change, I keep certain money in this account. This is why this is retained earning. This is called as revaluation money. I bought gold, say, for 50,000. Now the price of the gold is 20,000. So whatever gold I was holding, its value has decreased. If I'm holding certain amount of currency in rupees and rupee loses value in terms of dollar, it was 60, now it is 75. That means now the value of rupee has gone down, my currency has lost value. Now to maintain this positive and negative, I will keep certain money in this account. कुछ इनकम मैं यहाँ रखूंगा, कुछ इनकम मैं नॉर्मल अपने रिस्क के लिए रखूंगा. The question is, how much should I keep here? One is for managing risk and the other is for managing the price risk revaluation. Both of them are risk. अब जरूरी तो नहीं है ये इंसिडेंट्स होंगे इकोनॉमी में. जरूरी तो नहीं है गोल्ड की वैल्यू कम होगी, गोल्ड की वैल्यू बढ़ेगी भी. That means this account should always have a lot of money. Then how exactly, how much money from this should go here or there? for determining how much should be going in these accounts and how much surplus should be given to the government, there have been number of committees which have been set up. The last committee to be set up here was the Bimal Jalan committee. Bimal Jalan committee said the total money which you should keep as reserve should be somewhere around 20 to 24.5% of your total assets. जितनी आपका बैलेंस शीट है उसका उतना अमाउंट आपको रखना है. Out of which 5.5 to 6.5 is what you can keep in contingency fund. Rest you can keep in all funds. This is the economic capital which you can keep in your reserves. This is the total. I think it's 25.5. And contingency fund में 5.5 to 6.5 होना चाहिए. Rest of total accounts में including revaluation account में इतना पैसा जाना चाहिए. So every year whatever income you earn, you can keep this amount. ये minimum, ये maximum. And rest you can transfer to the government. Is the idea clear? Using this account is what the RBI has done in the last few years, not last 2-3, before 2020. RBI has given significant surplus to the government by keeping less money here and also doing certain accounting changes. Why? I can budget for that. For example, dividend आता है. Dividend from PSUs, right? I budget what? What is the idea of budget? Estimated income and estimated expenditure. तो मेरी estimated income है ये, हर साल आती है. Why is it creating inflation? I'm not printing new money. As the process, what I am doing, the functions, I have certain income.
Then if this money will be RBI, then it will act as a reserve, no?
So it can act as reserve, less money will come to the government. वो तो आप ये बोल रहे हो कि जैसे FCI के पास पैसा है, FCI ने खुद ज़्यादा रख लिया और गवर्नमेंट को कम दिया, तो मेरी इनकम कम हो जाएगी. If FCI does not share all of the profit with me, profit is two. Profit is distributed profit, dividend and undistributed profit or retained earning. अगर मैंने retained earning बढ़ा ली, तो मैं profit कम दिया गवर्नमेंट को. तो same thing अगर मैंने retained earning बढ़ा दी, गवर्नमेंट को कम मिलेगा. Contingency fund is for risk which we call retained earning. These are called as revaluation reserves. यहाँ पे अकाउंटिंग बहुत ट्रिकी है. यहाँ पे गवर्नमेंट क्या करती है, सस्ता खरीद के महंगा बेच लेती है आरबीआई, फिर दोबारा जब रेट कम होता है सेम चीज़ कम रेट पे खरीद लेती है, तो बहुत ज़्यादा पैसा बन जाता है यहाँ पे. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, आई बॉट सिक्योरिटीज, आई बॉट सर्टन थिंग एट 40, 10 साल पहले, मैंने आज 60 रुपये का बेच दिया, राइट? दिस इज द बेनिफिट आई गॉट. सो रिवैल्यूएशन अकाउंट में पैसे आ जाएंगे. आई ट्रांसफर दिस मनी टू द गवर्नमेंट क्योंकि मेरे को इसका 20% रखना है, राइट? नए अकाउंटिंग ईयर में मैंने सेम चीज़ 58 की खरीद ली वापस से, तो मेरा एसेट बन गया, वापस एसेट आ गया सेम. अब रिवैल्यूएशन में पैसे थोड़े कम हो जाएंगे, अगले साल सेम एक्टिविटी कर लूंगा. यू डोंट हैव टू गो हेयर. ये बहुत ट्रिकी है हाउ द आरबीआई मैनेजेस इट, बट आरबीआई कैन ट्वीक दीज थिंग्स टू गिव मोर मनी टू द गवर्नमेंट. सो बिमल जलान कमिटी, you just need to remember के बताया है कितना रखना और कितना surplus देना है. Why they have to keep, you need to be clear. One is reserves in contingency, retained, and the other is revaluation money. Is the idea clear? RBI surplus transfer. Is the balance sheet idea clear? What is seniorage and how they earn money? Incidental to their objective, they are getting money. What to do with this income? This income has to be transferred to the government after keeping some money for reserves. How much reserves should be is determined by various experts committee. Before Bimal Jalan committee, there was a Usha Thorat committee, Malekam committee. Everyone recommended what money you should keep for risk management, rest you can transfer. Why this becomes tricky is, this is clear. Contingency fund में risk के लिए क्या पैसे हैं? Problem है इस fund में कितने पैसे होने चाहिए? This is a problematic fund. Here is where you can change the accounting form. These two are together the important ones. Total you have to keep this much of your balance sheet, जिसमें से retained earning इतना होना चाहिए. Is the idea clear? RBI surplus. Understanding the balance sheet is important here, that why any central bank is creating money. Now the same concept we said, if SDR will become the global currency, the US will not earn this money, because no currency is backed by asset. So I promise to pay the bearer holds no significance, because in 1957 every country was given the freedom to move away from proportional. Earlier we started with the gold standard. Gold standard mein it was 100% coverage. Then we moved to a proportional reserve. Proportional only 40% coverage. Now it is a minimum reserve, no coverage. If there is no coverage, that means this paper has absolutely no intrinsic value and has no backing. When they have no intrinsic and no backing, why are people trusting this? Point is, why are people trusting if there is no backing and no intrinsic value? Why are people trusting this currency? Because it is a legal tender. That's all. Government ने बोला इसलिए. What are the features of a currency? It should be a medium of exchange. It should be a value measurement unit of account, and it should be a store of value. Government का legal tender ये दोनों चीजें करवा सकता है. That it is a unit of exchange, everybody has to accept. Government का legal tender, it can help you get the monetary value in terms of rupees. But can the legal tender maintain this? That if you earned 1 crore rupees today and kept it in cash, ये 2 साल बाद भी 1 crore value रहेगी. If it's not the same, why are you trusting this? This is where the central bank is important. The RBI, the central bank was created कि monetary stability ये करेंगे. किसी भी currency में value तभी आती है when the currency is scarce but has certain predictability. एकदम ज़्यादा print कर दोगे, store of value will be eroded. Why do you think gold has value? Scarce along with predictability. It has no alternate use. If you have too much of use, this will not happen. Use नहीं है इसलिए उसमें value है. इसमें भी इसका paper का कोई और use नहीं है. It is scarce along with predictability. And this is what was challenged by Bitcoin. Bitcoin said, why are you trusting your government money when they are not providing you this? Bitcoin created the same thing. Bitcoin created something which is liquid gold. Gold की क्या characteristics हैं? Gold has no use. Gold is scarce along with predictability. You can't increase the quantity of gold, not liquid, digital gold. You can't increase gold whenever you want, and gold is limited. Same with Bitcoin. Bitcoin, the quantity is fixed and mining is very difficult. That means it becomes scarce along with predictability. And since it is not controlled by a central authority, they will not be able to increase this. RBI right now can print more currency and reduce the value. But Bitcoin is not centrally controlled, so it will not be able to increase the value. This is how Bitcoin challenged the whole system. That why are you trusting your currency जब store of value ही नहीं है? Consider what the central bank does. Inflation benefits whom? Inflation benefits debtor. Who's a net debtor in the economy? The biggest debtor? Government. So any day the RBI can ask the government to inflate away the debt. Value अपने आप कम देनी पड़ेगी. So government का तो incentive है currency की value ना maintain करे, inflation करे. If they do inflation, you are losing value. So why not have a decentralized currency? That is Bitcoin. Bitcoin challenges the system. The only reason why is Bitcoin not accepted? At the end of the day, any currency can do these three things only if it enjoys the trust. अगर लोग आपस में ही नहीं कन्वर्ट करेंगे, गवर्नमेंट ने ये दो सॉल्व कर दिया, सेंट्रल बैंक ने ये सॉल्व कर दिया, यू ट्रस्ट दिस मोर, यू डोंट ट्रस्ट एन अनोनिमस सिस्टम विच इज द डे मोर पीपल आर ट्रस्टिंग this currency will be gone. The day more number of people start accepting Bitcoin, अभी कर नहीं रहे हैं because they think what if the thing vanishes. Founder पता नहीं है, founder पता होता founder जिंदा ही ना रहता 1 घंटे भी. It's very clear. Why would he risk his life? Because he's created a system which can create anarchy. Why will you have control? The government has absolutely no control. This is why central bank throughout the country started distributing digital currencies. India is also talking about digital currency, so that we can remove the trust here. But if you see, Bitcoin has absolute perfect conditions for being a currency. The only reason is that it is a digital form people don't trust. Because if you compare gold and Bitcoin, they're absolutely the same. The only form is different. Gold is physical, Bitcoin is digital. तो हार पहना के पहन नहीं सकते. Otherwise, gold has absolutely no use. Why do you think people trust gold? The only reason why people trust gold is this. Otherwise, gold has absolutely no characteristics. Same thing was replicated by Bitcoin. I'm not talking about all other bit currencies, but Bitcoin. Bitcoin ने gold achieve इसलिए किया, quantity fix कर दी, mining मुश्किल बना दी. So it became scarce with predictability. Same thing you cannot say about central bank. Central bank तो print कर ही रहे हैं. Currency कितनी थी और आज currency कितनी है circulation में, this is already happening. So store of value is not proper. So you always have to work hard to get that extra money, because the same money is not value today, will be having the value 1 year later. Is the idea of surplus transfer clear? Surplus transfer and the central bank. Just observe the pattern. ये बहुत surprising हुआ था. इसलिए because how they account for money in the revaluation account was changed. The accounting formula for keeping money in CGRA was changed. Though they had said 20 to 24, but how much I will keep on what exercise they did, ये बहुत बड़ा shift आया था. But then it dropped coming back because central bank exchange currency at certain high values. Those analysis you don't have to go into. You just need to understand कि surplus बनता कैसे है, and surplus पूरा क्यों नहीं जाता, what amount they have to keep, what committee they are telling, a broader trend. This also I think has been asked in one of the papers. UPSC, no, this was not asked. They had asked, capitalization coming from government to the public sector banks is increasing in the last 10 years or not. So same trend can be asked in the surplus coming from RBI to the government. Transition from LIBOR, we'll discuss in the next class. Rest of the topics next. We'll most probably try to finish in the next, because agriculture onwards are mostly factual topics. So conceptual topics for external market तक ही हैं. Certain topics in agriculture industry which are there to discuss, I'll discuss it. अगर कल हो जाता है ठीक है, नहीं तो then we'll have a class on Sunday. Thank you.